Welcome back, my friends. Today we are diving into methods to make you unbreakable against women. The strongest men in history were not those who conquered armies, but those who conquered their own desires. Think about that for a moment. Imagine standing in a palace, marble pillars towering above you, gold ornaments glittering in torchlight. The emperor's lover walks past, known for her beauty, for her cunning, for her ability to bend men to her will. And yet she cannot break his composure. His gaze does not falter. His breathing does not change. He remains unmoved, as if her presence were nothing more than smoke drifting through the hall. What did these men know that we've forgotten? What secret strength made them immune to the very temptations that brought others to ruin? Tonight, you will learn the forbidden Stoic secrets that made emperors, generals and philosophers unbreakable against the most dangerous tests of all, the subtle manipulations of desire, seduction, and betrayal. These are not stories of men who hid in ivory towers writing gentle poems. These are stories of men who ruled, fought, and endured, while the world around them burned with chaos and treachery. Stoicism was not a dry philosophy to be studied by scholars. It was a weapon, a shield forged in the fire of war and betrayal, polished in the courts of intrigue, and sharpened in the silent chambers of temptation. The men who lived by its principles did so not for comfort, but for survival. Because in their world, to be broken by passion or to be owned by desire meant the loss of power, the loss of freedom, and in many cases, the loss of life itself. These secrets were whispered among emperors who faced conspiracies in their own bedrooms, among generals whose wives and mistresses were courted by enemies, eager to twist loyalty into treason, among philosophers who walked through the markets of Rome, mocked and tempted, yet never once bowed their heads in shame. And while the centuries have passed, the truth has not changed. The methods they practiced, the rituals they performed, and the discipline they wielded remain as deadly effective today as they were 2,000 years ago. In this video, you will uncover 7 rarely revealed practices, principles so brutal, so uncompromising, that they carved into men a strength no woman, no betrayal, no temptation could break. These were not gentle affirmations. They were cold disciplines, designed to strip away weakness and reveal the core of a man who could not be manipulated. You will hear of the emperor who trained his gaze to see the soul rather than the skin, of the general who prepared daily for betrayal so that not even his wife's treachery could move him, of the philosopher who, as a slave, laughed in the face of mockery and later counseled the very people who once humiliated him, of the soldier who endured public shame in silence, and in that silence found more power than any words could ever give. Each of these lessons comes from the crucible of history. They are not theories. They were tested by men who faced the sharpest daggers and the cruelest temptations. By the end of this journey, you will not simply know what Stoicism is. You will hold in your hands the very tactics that made the greatest men in history mentally unbreakable. So ask yourself, are you ready to stand where they stood? To face the same fire and come out forged into something harder than iron? Then listen closely, because the 7 brutal Stoic secrets are about to be revealed. In the private chambers of Marcus Aurelius, the night was never without tests. Behind the polished marble doors, servants whispered, and messengers slipped in with subtle agendas. Among them were courtesans, women chosen for their beauty and sent to tempt the emperor into weakness. They were not gifts of pleasure. They were weapons, sharpened by rivals who understood that the fall of a man often begins with his gaze. Marcus Aurelius did not shield himself from these trials. Instead, he confronted them with discipline that few could imagine. He trained his eyes never to linger. A fleeting glance could become a chain, a spark that grew into fire. To him, desire was not passion. Desire was enslavement, the beginning of a ruler's decline. He believed the battle for mastery did not start on the battlefield or in the Senate chamber. It began with perception, in the simple act of looking. If you allowed your eyes to be pulled, you had already surrendered ground. The man who could not control his gaze could not control his life. Modern men think they are immune to this test, yet they are surrounded by it constantly. The glow of a screen filled with images designed to seize attention. The lingering glance at beauty in the office, on the street, or across a crowded room. Each moment of weakness is a thread, and enough threads woven together will bind a man in chains. Marcus understood what many forget. To be unbreakable, you must master the smallest of choices. The first step before desire takes root. He did not avoid women, nor did he fear them. He simply saw through the surface. He looked upon people not as flesh meant to seduce, but as souls bound by the same mortality and flaws as himself. There was a ritual he practiced in silence every morning. Before the sun rose, before Rome stirred awake, he would sit alone and remind himself, see the soul, not the skin. This vow was not a whisper of morality, but a declaration of power. For the man who sees beyond the surface can never be owned by it. The emperor's gaze was more than discipline. It was armor, an unbreakable shield against the most ancient form of manipulation, and that is the first secret. If you can master your eyes, you will master yourself. In the annals of Rome, there is a story of a decorated general, a man who had led legions across the frontiers and returned victorious. Yet the most dangerous battle he ever faced was not against barbarians or rival armies. It was within his own household. Whispers reached him that his wife, a woman of noble birth, had been conspiring with his political rivals. Not only her affection, but her loyalty had shifted into betrayal. For most men, such news would unleash fury. Rage, humiliation, and the thirst for revenge would consume them. Many leaders before him had executed wives, lovers, even friends for less. But this general did something different. He had prepared for this moment long before it arrived. Each morning, before donning his armor, he practiced what the Stoics called premeditation malorum, the premeditation of evils. He imagined betrayal as inevitable. He pictured his closest allies abandoning him, his family turning against him, his soldiers failing him. By rehearsing these calamities in his mind, he stripped them of their power. When they happened, they no longer shocked him. So when the whispers became proof, he felt no tremor of surprise, no tightening of the chest, no consuming fire of vengeance. Instead, he regarded the betrayal as nature itself, as common as a storm breaking across the sea. To expect loyalty without fail, he believed, was to live in a fantasy. To expect betrayal was to live in truth. This mindset turned his enemy's weapon into dust. The plot they believed would unmake him did nothing. In fact, he went further. He confronted the rival who had gained his wife's favor, not with wrath but with composure. And in an act that stunned the Senate, he promoted the man to higher office. It was not weakness. It was dominance. For in that moment, he showed that no insult, no conspiracy, no theft of affection could disturb his reason. He ruled not by force of passion, but by mastery of self. His enemies gained nothing, and his legend grew greater because of it. This is the second secret. Expect betrayal as natural, and it will never own you. In your own life, whether from friends, family, or women, betrayal loses its sting when you have already rehearsed it in the mind. Emotional immunity makes you untouchable. The general's legacy endures for one reason. When others sought to wound him through his heart, he proved that his heart was beyond their reach. Among the most famous Stoics of Rome was a man who began life not in wealth or honor, but in chains. His name was Epictetus. He was born a slave, treated as property, subjected to the cruelty of his master, and yet, from this lowly station, he rose to a level of authority that even free men envied. One story tells of his humiliation in the presence of noble guests. His master, eager to entertain, mocked him openly, forcing him to perform degrading tasks and endure ridicule. Among the spectators were women of the court, who laughed at his condition, jeering at his weakness. For most men, such shame would cut deeper than any blade. Anger, desperation, or despair would spill out uncontrollably. But Epictetus did not flinch. Instead, he stood in calm silence. His mind was untouched. He once said, "You may insult my body, but you cannot touch my reason." The body could be chained. The reputation could be dragged through the mud. But the inner fortress of thought, that domain remained sovereign. This was the core of his philosophy. True power is not measured by possessions, approval, or reputation. It is measured by the mastery of one's own mind. For while fortune can strip away status, wealth, or even freedom, it cannot touch the reasoning faculty unless you surrender it willingly. This truth makes a man invincible. Because if your worth is not tied to the praise of others, then insults carry no weight. If your identity is not built on possessions, then loss cannot destroy you. If your peace is not dependent on another's affection, then rejection cannot move you. In modern life, this remains the most brutal test. Insults, rejection, and the subtle games played to provoke emotion are constant. Many men crumble when mocked, or when a woman withholds approval. They lash out, they beg, or they retreat into self-doubt. But the man who understands Epictetus's lesson remains untouchable. He knows that his value is not something given by others, and therefore cannot be taken away by others. Epictetus endured slavery, scorn, and humiliation, yet never surrendered his calm. And when he was finally freed, something remarkable happened. The same society that once laughed at him now sought his wisdom. Women of Rome, who had once ridiculed the slave, later came quietly to his lectures, seeking counsel on how to endure their own trials. The man who began life with nothing ended with influence greater than kings, not because of what he owned, but because of what he could never lose, the mastery of his own mind. That is the third secret. A man who builds his self-worth on the unshakable foundation of reason is a man who can never be owned. In the heart of Rome, influence often came not only through the Senate floor or the battlefield, but through the chambers of desire. One senator, admired for his clarity of judgment, faced a temptation that few men could resist. A widow of immense wealth and renown set her sights on him. She was not only beautiful but also powerful, her late husband having left her estates, servants, and a network of allies eager to maintain her favor. Many men competed for her attention, each hoping to secure her fortune and the influence that accompanied her hand. She approached the senator with an offer that seemed impossible to refuse. Riches beyond measure, estates that could guarantee his children's prosperity, influence in the Senate through her allies, and companionship with a woman whose beauty was spoken of in whispers. Most men would have seen this as fortune smiling upon them. Most men would have surrendered, but this senator understood something deeper. He saw what others did not. Her offer was not freedom, but a chain. For the man who needs another's wealth, another's beauty, or another's influence no longer rules himself. He is ruled by what he craves. The senator's response was short but unforgettable. To need her is to be owned by her. With those words, he declined her hand. No hesitation, no apology, no elaborate excuse. Just the clarity of a man unwilling to trade freedom for comfort. The widow was astonished. Accustomed to bending men with her offers, she turned her attention to others. And indeed other men fell. One senator accepted her wealth, and soon found himself a puppet, his every vote in the Senate dictated by her will. Another sought her beauty, and when she withdrew her affection, he crumbled in disgrace. She destroyed them not with daggers or poison, but with chains of desire. The man who walked away remained unbroken. His independence became a legend, whispered as both a warning and a lesson. While others gained temporary pleasure and quick ruin, he preserved something far more valuable: sovereignty over himself. The Stoic principle here is brutal in its simplicity. Freedom means desiring nothing that enslaves you. It is not wealth itself that corrupts, nor beauty, nor influence, but the need for them. Once you believe you cannot live without these things, you have already surrendered your will. In modern life, the trap is no less common. Many men trade their freedom for transactional relationships, where wealth and beauty become bargaining chips. They accept terms that bind them, mistaking golden chains for fortune. Yet chains are chains no matter how they glitter. The senator's refusal remains the lesson. To be unbreakable, you must walk away from anything that seeks to own you, no matter how tempting it appears. For what is gained in dependence will always cost more than it is worth. That is the fourth secret. The man who needs nothing cannot be owned by anyone. There is a tale from the late days of the Roman Republic, when intrigue flowed more freely than wine. A philosopher of great renown was invited to a banquet hosted by a woman whose beauty was matched only by her reputation for manipulation. She was known to ensnare men of power, drawing secrets from them under the influence of desire, and then using those secrets as weapons. At the feast, she presented the philosopher with a jeweled goblet of wine. The aroma was sweet, the color deep, but the cup was laced with herbs said to cloud the mind and inflame the body. It was not meant to honor him, but to bind him. Once weakened by passion, he could be blackmailed, controlled, even ruined. Most men in his position would have accepted without question. To refuse a drink in such company was an insult. To deny her was to risk offense, and perhaps even political retaliation. Yet the philosopher knew the truth. Pleasure that costs freedom is poison. He held the cup in his hand, studied it, and smiled politely. Instead of drinking, he set it aside. He asked for water, clear and untainted, and lifted it in a quiet toast. It was a small gesture, but one that spoke louder than any speech. He chose clarity over indulgence, freedom over desire, discipline over weakness. The hall fell into silence. The seductress's weapon had failed. Her scheme collapsed, not because of confrontation, but because the man she sought to trap refused to play the game at all. By denying the poisoned cup, he denied her power. This is the essence of Stoic wisdom. Not all pleasures are gifts. Many are traps, designed to enslave the will and bend the spirit. What appears sweet on the surface may carry within it chains that bind you tighter than iron. The modern world offers its own poisoned cups. They come not only in the form of lust, but in endless digital distractions, hollow indulgences and fleeting pleasures that steal hours, weaken focus, and erode resolve. Each one promises delight, but the cost is freedom. The man who accepts without discipline becomes dependent, ruled by cravings rather than reason. The philosopher's lesson is timeless. To remain unbreakable, you must examine every pleasure with suspicion. Ask not only what it offers, but what it demands in return. If it demands your freedom, your focus, or your self-respect, then it is no gift at all. It is poison. That night the philosopher left the banquet untouched, his reputation intact, his will unbroken. The seductress turned her schemes on others, and lesser men fell. But his quiet act of rebellion, raising a simple cup of water, became legend. That is the fifth secret. The man who refuses the poisoned cup can never be mastered. In the dusty camps along the Roman frontier, soldiers were tested not only by the sword, but by the eyes of those who watched them. Among these warriors was a centurion known for his iron discipline. He had marched through snow, fought through ambushes, and carried the scars of countless campaigns. Yet his greatest trial came not on the battlefield, but in the heart of Rome. Word spread quickly through the capital. His wife, a woman of high birth, was seen in the arms of another man. The whispers grew into open mockery. Rivals expected him to lash out with violence, to challenge the offender, to stain the streets with blood. Others expected him to crumble, humiliated before his men. A lesser soldier might have done both, but this centurion did neither. He showed no anger, no visible wound. He did not confront his wife in public, nor raise his voice in private. He spoke nothing of it at all. Instead, he carried on his duties with the same precision as before, drilling his soldiers, leading his marches, enforcing order. His silence unsettled everyone. The enemy could not provoke him. The gossipers could not shake him. The more they sought a reaction, the more his composure revealed their weakness. This was not passivity. it was strategy. He understood the Stoic principle that silence is a weapon. To rage, to argue, or to plead would have surrendered power to those who sought to break him. Indifference was stronger than confrontation, for it starved manipulation at its root. In modern life, the same truth holds. Many attempt to provoke men into emotional outbursts. Through insults, rejection, or public humiliation, the man who reacts gives away his strength, showing that his state of mind belongs to others. But the man who remains silent, who shows indifference, cannot be controlled. He starves the fire of attention until it dies on its own. The centurion's silence grew louder than any words could. His enemies could not twist his image into one of a jealous fool. His soldiers, seeing his unshaken demeanor, respected him more. Even the Senate, hearing of his restraint, elevated him further, for they trusted a man who could not be baited by scandal. And as for the accuser, the man who flaunted the affair, his name soon faded into shame. Without reaction to fuel his triumph, he became nothing more than a shadow of gossip, forgotten as quickly as he rose. The lesson is clear. Silence is not weakness. It is mastery. The unbreakable man does not need to defend his pride with words or violence. His composure speaks louder than any reply. That is the sixth secret. The man who governs his tongue and his temper rules not only himself but all who seek to provoke him. There is an account of a philosopher whose wife passed away after many years at his side. She was admired in the city, loved by her household, and her funeral was attended by crowds who came to mourn. The air was thick with incense, the sound of weeping echoed through the streets, and her body was carried with solemnity to its resting place. Among those gathered, all eyes turned to her husband. They expected him to collapse in grief, to weep as others wept, to show the same raw emotion that death forces upon even the strongest. But he did none of these things. He stood calm, his face composed, his gaze steady. He neither tore his garments in anguish, nor shed a single tear. His composure unsettled the mourners, who whispered that his heart must be made of stone. One man confronted him openly, mocking him before the crowd. "Do you feel nothing? Was she nothing to you, that you stand as if you have lost no one at all?" The philosopher's reply was simple, but it carried the weight of centuries. Death is not cruelty, but nature's order. To resist is to defy reason. He explained that grief is not owed to death, for death is no injustice. It is the destiny of all men and women, the cycle of nature itself. To rage against it is as futile as raging against the setting sun. Tears do not change the order of the universe. Reason demands acceptance, for what cannot be altered must be embraced. The Stoic principle is clear. To accept nature is to master suffering. Even the loss of love is not tragedy but training. Each heartbreak is an opportunity to strengthen the mind against what is inevitable. To cling desperately to what must pass is to guarantee endless torment. To accept with calm is to become indestructible. Modern men face this trial in different forms. The end of a relationship, betrayal, abandonment, heartbreak. Each feels like death and each tempts men to collapse in grief. But the philosopher's example reveals the path of mastery. Do not curse nature for taking what was never yours to keep. Stand firm, let reason guide you, and move forward unbroken. When the final rites were finished, the philosopher did something that chilled those who witnessed it. As the mourners sobbed and the air was filled with lamentation, he turned from the graveside and walked away with head unbowed, steps steady and spirit unshaken. Where others dissolved into sorrow, he carried himself like stone, a living reminder that no power in the world, not even death, could bend his reason. That is the seventh secret. Acceptance is not indifference, it is power. The man who accepts all that nature brings cannot be destroyed by loss, for nothing can take away his mastery of himself. The lessons are now before you: the emperor's gaze, the betrayed general, the slave who owned his masters, the widow's trap, the poisoned cup, the soldier of silence, and the philosopher's funeral. 7 brutal secrets, each forged by men who refused to be broken. These were not abstract ideas or comfortable teachings. They were weapons sharpened by necessity, proven in the harshest trials of life. Men who ruled empires, commanded armies, and endured humiliation carried these principles as their shield. They stood unmovable, even when beauty, betrayal, temptation, and death itself tried to break them. And you too can carry them. Implementing even one will separate you from the ordinary. Because most men surrender their minds at the first test. They let their gaze be captured, their emotions be provoked, their desires be chained, their grief consume them. But the man who takes these secrets into himself walks another path. He is no longer ruled by what he cannot control. He rules himself, and that is the highest form of power. So let this be your final strike of the night. Start tomorrow. Do not let your eyes, your heart, or your silence be controlled by another. That is the first step to becoming unbreakable. Begin with the first secret. Tomorrow morning, practice the Emperor's gaze. Notice where your eyes wander and take back control. Train your perception, and you will discover that the first battle is already won. And if you are ready for more, subscribe now. This is only the beginning. There are countless forbidden Stoic secrets waiting to be revealed. Secrets that will arm you with the same strength that once shaped emperors, generals, and philosophers. Stay vigilant. Stay disciplined. Stay unbreakable.
There's a weapon more dangerous than any sharp tongue, more powerful than the loudest voice in the room. It's the one thing weak men fear most and strong men wield without effort. Silence. Not the silence of a coward who has nothing to say, but the calculated, deliberate silence of a man who knows exactly when to speak and when to let his presence do the talking. In a world drowning in noise, where every fool with a phone thinks their opinion matters, where grown men argue like children over things they can't control, true power has become rare, and that power lives in the space between words. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern men have forgotten. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, could have commanded legions with a word, could have silenced any critic with his authority. Yet his journals reveal a man obsessed not with what he should say, but with what he should leave unsaid. Epictetus, who went from slave to one of history's most respected philosophers, built his entire teaching on the foundation of restraint. And Seneca, advisor to emperors, wrote more about the dangers of loose lips than he did about the power of persuasion. These weren't weak men. These weren't cowards. They were warriors, leaders, philosophers who shaped the world, and they all knew one undeniable truth. A man who masters his mouth masters his life. Today, I'm going to show you 6 situations where silence isn't just golden, it's absolutely lethal. These moments will separate you from 99% of men who talk themselves into weakness every single day. One of these situations involves a trap so subtle that even smart men fall into it, destroying their reputation without realizing it. By the end of this video, you'll never look at conversation the same way again. You'll understand why the quietest man in the room is often the most dangerous. And you'll learn how to wield silence like the ancient philosophers did, as a weapon that cuts without ever being drawn. So, if you're ready to stop being just another voice in the crowd and start becoming the man everyone remembers, the man people respect even when he says nothing, then pay attention. Because what I'm about to share isn't theory, it's battle-tested wisdom that's been proving itself for over 2,000 years. Let's start with the first situation, and this one hits home for every man who's ever been confronted by someone who's lost control. Picture this. You're in a meeting, or maybe at a family gathering, or just having a conversation. Suddenly, someone comes at you with pure rage. Their face is red, their voice is raised, they're attacking your character, your decisions, your very existence. Everything in your body screams at you to fight back, to defend yourself, to match their energy and put them in their place. And that's exactly what weak men do. They take the bait, they raise their voice, they defend, explain, justify. They step into the ring thinking they're showing strength, when really they're revealing the exact opposite. Here's what the Stoics knew that most men never learn. Anger is temporary insanity. Seneca wrote extensively about this. When someone is angry, They're not thinking, they're reacting. Their rational mind has been hijacked by emotion, and in that state they're essentially having a conversation with themselves. They're not actually hearing you, they're hearing their own narrative, their own story, their own pain. So when you respond with words, with explanations, with counter-arguments, you're feeding the beast. You're giving their insanity something to latch onto, something to justify itself against. But when you go silent, everything changes. Silence in the face of anger is like throwing water on fire. The angry person expects resistance. They're geared up for a fight. Their entire emotional system is primed for your reaction. And when you give them nothing, when you simply stand there with calm eyes and a closed mouth, something extraordinary happens. They're forced to confront their own reflection. Without your words to bounce off, their anger has nowhere to go but back into themselves. And in that moment, they begin to hear how they sound. They begin to see how they look. The mirror you're holding up through your silence is far more devastating than any comeback you could deliver. Marcus Aurelius faced opposition constantly. The Roman Senate was filled with men who questioned his decisions, challenged his authority, spoke against him in public forums. And his response? Documented in his own writings, he would often sit in complete silence as senators railed against him. He understood something profound. The best answer to anger is silence, not because he was afraid, not because he couldn't defend himself, but because he recognized that angry men defeat themselves if you simply give them enough rope. There's a psychological principle at work here that modern science has confirmed. Mirror neurons in our brains cause us to unconsciously match the emotional state of people around us. It's why yawning is contagious. It's why you feel uncomfortable when someone near you is anxious. And it's why arguments escalate. When someone comes at you with anger, and you respond with anger, you're creating an amplification loop. Both of you are mirroring and intensifying each other's rage. But silence breaks the circuit. When you refuse to mirror their anger, their brain starts searching for a different signal to sync with. And if you maintain calm, steady presence, something shifts. The angry person begins, often unconsciously, to regulate down toward your state rather than escalating further. I've seen this play out in corporate boardrooms. A colleague of mine once sat completely silent while a director screamed at him about a project delay. Not a word, not a defense, not an excuse, just calm, steady presence. The director raged for maybe 2 minutes, which felt like an eternity, and then, with nothing to push against, the anger just collapsed. The director actually apologized before the meeting ended. My colleague never had to say a single word in his own defense. His silence said everything that needed to be said. It said, "I'm not playing this game. I'm not meeting you in your chaos. I'm staying here, in control, while you lose yours." This is power, real, genuine power, not the fake machismo of always having a comeback, not the insecurity of needing to defend every slight, but the unshakable strength of a man who knows that angry people are fighting themselves, not you, and you don't need to participate in their self-destruction. But here's what you need to understand. This silence isn't passive. It's not weakness disguised as calm. It's active, intentional presence. You're not hiding, you're not cowering, you're standing there, fully present, fully aware, choosing not to add fuel to someone else's fire. That choice, that discipline, that restraint, that's what makes you dangerous. Because a man who can't be provoked into losing control is a man who can't be defeated by emotional manipulation. Now, there's a second situation that trips up even smart, capable men. And I guarantee it's happened to you more times than you realize. Someone criticizes you. Maybe it's at work. Maybe it's in your social circle. Maybe it's online. The criticism is unfair, maybe even baseless. They question your competence, your motives, your worth, and immediately your brain starts constructing a defense. You want to explain why they're wrong. You want to correct the record. You want everyone to know the truth. And that impulse, that need to defend yourself, that's the trap. Here's what weak men don't understand. The moment you defend yourself against criticism, you've already lost. Why? Because defense is an admission that the criticism has power over you. It reveals that you need others to see you correctly, that your sense of self depends on their approval. Every word of explanation you offer is proof that their opinion matters more to you than your own knowledge of who you are. The Stoics had a framework for this, and it's one of the most powerful concepts in their philosophy: the dichotomy of control. There are things within your control and things outside it. Your actions, your intentions, your effort, those are yours. But other people's opinions, judgments, perceptions, those are completely outside your control. You can influence them, maybe, but you cannot control them. And when you try, when you argue and defend and explain, you're spending your precious energy and attention on something you have no real power over. Galileo understood this at the deepest level. When he proposed that the Earth revolved around the sun, he faced persecution from the most powerful institutions of his time. The church, academic authorities, the entire establishment came against him. They called him a heretic, a fool, a danger to society, and while he did eventually recant under threat of execution, which is a reasonable response to literal torture, his approach to criticism in the years before was telling. He didn't spend his time arguing with every critic. He didn't write long defenses every time someone attacked his work. He did his research, he made his observations, he documented his findings, and then he let his work speak. That's the power move. Silence in the face of criticism forces critics to confront their own lack of substance. When you don't engage, when you don't defend, their criticism has nothing to bounce off. It just hangs there in the air, naked and exposed. And if the criticism was baseless, as unfair criticism usually is, it reveals itself as such without you having to say a word. Think about the last time someone criticized you unfairly at work. Maybe they questioned a decision you made, or suggested you weren't pulling your weight, or implied you didn't know what you were doing. If you're like most people, you probably immediately started explaining, "Here's why I did it this way. Here's all the work you didn't see. Here's the context you're missing." And with every explanation, what were you really doing? You were trying to convince them, which means you were putting your sense of competence in their hands. You were saying, without realizing it, your opinion of me matters more than my own knowledge of my work. But imagine instead you had simply nodded, said, "I hear you," and gone back to your work. No defense, no explanation, no justification, just acknowledgement and a return to producing results. What happens? The critic is left holding their criticism with nothing to do with it. And if your work is actually good, if your decisions were actually sound, the results will prove it. The criticism dissolves on its own. Your work becomes your defense, and work is always more convincing than words. There's a deeper truth here that goes beyond just protecting yourself from critics. When you develop the strength to let criticism exist without defending against it, you free yourself from the exhausting need for approval. You build an inner fortress that no outside opinion can penetrate. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Read that again. We claim to love ourselves, but we give other people's judgments more weight than our own self-knowledge. That's insanity, and defending yourself constantly is how you perpetuate that insanity. The man who stays silent in the face of criticism is telling himself a crucial truth. I know who I am, I know what I've done, I know my intentions, and I don't need you to see me correctly for any of that to remain true. That's freedom. That's power. That's the difference between a man who's controlled by others' opinions and a man who's governed by his own inner compass. Your work will speak. Your results will speak. Your character, demonstrated over time, will speak louder than any defense you could mount in a moment of criticism. So, save your energy, save your words. Let the critics talk, let them question, let them judge. And you just keep building, keep improving, keep producing. Let them wonder why their criticism didn't get a reaction. Let them realize slowly that you're operating on a level they don't have access to, a level where their approval was never required in the first place. Now, the third situation is something that happens every single day, and it's one of the most tempting traps a man can fall into. Gossip, rumors, people talking about you behind your back, spreading stories that aren't true, questioning your character to others. And somewhere, somehow, you hear about it. Someone tells you what so-and-so said about you. Someone forwards you a message. Someone gives you the heads up that people are talking. And your immediate instinct is to set the record straight, to correct the narrative, to defend your name. Don't. Here's what you need to understand about gossip and rumors. They're like fire. They need fuel to survive. And every time you respond, every time you address them, every time you try to correct them, you're throwing fuel on the flames. You're giving the rumor legitimacy by treating it as something worth responding to. You're spreading it further by talking about it, and you're revealing that it got to you, which is exactly what gossip thrives on. Seneca wrote something profound about this. He said we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about what gossip is. It's other people's imagination. It's stories they're telling themselves, narratives they're creating, often to make themselves feel better about their own lives. And when you engage with those stories, when you try to correct them, you're stepping into their imagination and trying to rewrite it. But you can't control their imagination. You never could. That's not your domain. The strategic move is to let rumors die of starvation. No fuel, no response, no energy, just silence and consistent character. Because here's the thing about rumors. They have a lifespan. If you don't feed them, they run out of steam. People get bored. New gossip comes along. The story fades. But it can only fade if you let it. There was a CEO of a mid-sized company who faced vicious rumors during a merger. People were saying he was being pushed out, that he'd mismanaged funds, that the board had lost confidence in him. None of it was true. His PR team wanted him to issue statements, do interviews, defend his reputation. He refused. He said, "I'll let the merger speak." And he went silent. For 3 months, he didn't address a single rumor. He just kept executing the merger, kept doing his job, kept showing up with the same steady leadership he'd always demonstrated. By the time the merger completed successfully, the rumors had died on their own, and the people who had spread them looked like fools. He never had to say a word. That's the power of silence combined with consistent character. Your reputation isn't built on what you say about yourself or what you say in response to others. It's built on what you do, day after day, week after week, year after year. Gossip is temporary, character is permanent, and the man who understands this can weather any rumor storm without breaking his stride. But there's something else at work here, something psychological that most people miss. When someone gossips about you, they're revealing far more about themselves than about you. They're showing their insecurities, their fears, their need to elevate themselves by diminishing others. And when you respond, when you engage, you're essentially saying you take their opinion seriously. You're validating their behavior by giving it attention. Silence, on the other hand, sends a different message. It says, your opinion of me is so insignificant that I'm not even going to acknowledge it exists. It says I'm operating at a level where your gossip can't reach me. It says I have more important things to focus on than correcting every false story that circulates about me. That's not arrogance. That's priority. That's understanding where your energy is best spent. And it's definitely not spent on defending yourself to people who've already decided to believe something false. The Stoics believed that your character is like a fortress. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel. It's a place inside you that external events can't touch, can't damage, can't penetrate. Gossip is an external event. It's happening out there, in other people's mouths and minds. But your character, your truth, your knowledge of who you are, that's in here, in the citadel. And a strong fortress doesn't send soldiers running out every time someone shouts insults from outside the walls. It simply stands, unshaken, unmoved, confident in its own strength. Over time, this approach does something remarkable. It builds such a strong reputation for integrity that rumors can't stick to you. People who know you, people who've seen your consistent character, they don't believe the gossip. And people who don't know you, their opinions don't matter anyway. You end up with a kind of immunity, not because you fought every rumor, but because you ignored them all and let your life be your testimony. So, when you hear that people are talking, when you discover a rumor circulating, when someone tells you what so-and-so said, take a breath. Recognize it for what it is: other people's imagination, other people's insecurity, other people's entertainment. And then go back to being who you are. Let them talk. Let them wonder why you're not reacting. Let them eventually realize that while they were gossiping, you were building. While they were talking, you were doing. While they were imagining, you were living in reality. The fourth situation is subtle, but it's one of the most revealing tests of a man's character, and most men fail it without even realizing they're being tested. You're in a meeting, a social gathering, a group conversation. Someone else is getting praised. Maybe they accomplished something impressive. Maybe they're being recognized for their work. Maybe everyone's attention is on them, celebrating their success. And as you sit there listening, a thought creeps in. But I did something just as good. But I worked just as hard. But no one's acknowledging what I've done. And you feel this almost irresistible urge to interject, to mention your own accomplishments, to make sure people know you're successful too. Stop right there, because what you're feeling is your ego screaming for validation. And if you listen to it, if you speak up, you're about to reveal something you don't want to reveal: insecurity. Here's what weak men don't understand. When you feel the need to mention your own accomplishments while someone else is being praised, you're announcing to everyone in the room that your sense of worth depends on external recognition. You're showing that you're keeping score. You're revealing that you measure yourself against others. And all of that, every bit of it, is the opposite of strength. A truly confident man, a stoically grounded man, can sit in a room while someone else receives all the praise and feel nothing but genuine appreciation for that person's success. Why? Because his sense of worth isn't tied to who's getting attention. His identity isn't dependent on being recognized. He knows what he's accomplished, he knows his own value, and he doesn't need the room to validate it. Marcus Aurelius, literally the Emperor of Rome, could have demanded praise constantly. He could have made sure every achievement was publicly celebrated. He could have ensured that his name was spoken with reverence at every opportunity, but read his meditations. You know what you find? A man constantly reminding himself that praise means nothing. Ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do, he wrote. Self-indulgence means tying it to the things that happen to you. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. Read that again. Your well-being, your sense of self, your inner peace, it should be tied to your own actions, not to how others respond to those actions. When you need praise, when you need recognition, when you need others to acknowledge what you've done, you've tied your well-being to something outside your control. And that's a prison. That's weakness disguised as ambition. The power move when someone else is being praised is radical silence. Not bitter silence, not jealous silence, but genuine, grounded, appreciative silence. You listen, you acknowledge their success. You might even congratulate them. But you don't make it about you. You don't redirect attention. You don't say, "That's great, and by the way, I just did this thing too." You let them have their moment. Fully, completely. And here's what happens. Here's the subtle magic of this kind of silence. People notice. They notice that you're secure enough to let someone else shine without dimming their light. They notice that you're not competing for scraps of attention. They notice that you operate from abundance, not scarcity. And paradoxically, your status rises. Not because you sought it, but because you demonstrated something rare. The confidence to be content in silence while others are celebrated. Think about social media for a moment. The entire platform is built on people broadcasting their achievements, seeking validation, competing for attention, constant updates about promotions, accomplishments, vacations, possessions, and underlying all of it is a desperate need to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be praised. The Stoic approach is the opposite. Do great work, accomplish meaningful things, and then, largely, keep quiet about it. Let your life speak louder than your posts. I'm not saying never share your achievements. I'm saying your first instinct, your driving motivation, should never be the need for others to acknowledge them. There's a massive difference between sharing from a place of abundance and sharing from a place of need. One is generous, an offering to inspire or inform. The other is begging, a plea for validation disguised as an update. The man who masters this fourth form of silence develops something priceless: internal validation. He becomes his own source of acknowledgement. He pats himself on the back. He tells himself he did well. He recognizes his own growth and effort. And that self-recognition becomes stronger and more sustaining than any external praise ever could be, because it's always available, it can never be taken away, and it doesn't depend on anyone else's mood, attention, or opinion. Seneca wrote, "Until we have begun to go without them, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are. We've been using them not because we needed them, but because we had them." The same is true of praise. Once you begin to go without seeking it, once you develop the discipline to let others shine while you remain quiet, you realize how unnecessary that external validation was. You were seeking it not because you needed it, but because the opportunity to seek it was always there. The confident man lets others be praised. The insecure man makes sure he's praised too. Which one are you? The next time you're in a room and someone else is getting recognition, watch your internal reaction. Notice if you feel that urge to redirect attention to yourself. And if you do, breathe. Let it pass. Stay silent. Let them have their moment. And notice how strong you feel when you do. That feeling, that quiet strength of not needing the spotlight, that's real power. That's the kind of power that can't be shaken because it doesn't depend on anything outside yourself. The fifth situation is one that destroys more potential than almost anything else. And it's so common, so normalized, that most men don't even recognize they're sabotaging themselves when they do it. You get excited about a new goal. Maybe it's a business idea. Maybe it's a fitness transformation. Maybe it's learning a new skill. Whatever it is, the excitement is real. The vision is clear. And your immediate instinct is to tell people about it. You want to share your plans. You want to announce your intentions. You want people to know what you're about to accomplish. And the moment you do that, the moment you broadcast your plans before you've executed them, you've just dramatically reduced your chances of success. There's actual science behind this, and it perfectly validates what the Stoics knew 2,000 years ago. When you tell people about your goals, your brain gets a hit of dopamine. It feels good. It feels like you've accomplished something just by sharing the intention. And that feeling, that premature sense of accomplishment, it actually reduces your motivation to do the work. Studies have shown that when people announce their goals publicly, they're less likely to achieve them because the announcement scratches the itch that the accomplishment was supposed to scratch. But beyond the psychology, there's strategy. When you share your plans too early, you invite doubt, negativity, and sabotage, often from people who don't even mean to derail you. They'll question your idea. They'll point out obstacles you haven't considered. They'll share stories of others who tried and failed. And even if their intentions are good, even if they think they're being helpful, they're planting seeds of doubt in your mind during the crucial early stage when your belief needs to be strongest. The Stoic principle here is simple. Actions speak louder than announcements. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." The same applies to your goals. Waste no more time announcing what you're going to do it. Let your results announce themselves. Let your transformation be the reveal. Let your success be the notification. Think about the entrepreneurs who talk endlessly about the business they're going to start versus the ones who quietly build until they have something real to show. Think about the guys who announce they're getting in shape, post about their new gym membership, tell everyone about their meal prep, versus the guys who just start training and let their physical transformation do the talking 6 months later. Which approach commands more respect? Which one actually gets results? There's power in moving in silence. When you keep your plans to yourself, you maintain strategic advantage. Competitors don't know what you're working on. Doubters can't plant seeds of uncertainty. Negative people can't drain your energy with their skepticism. You're operating in stealth mode, building momentum without interference, accumulating small wins without the pressure of public accountability to people who don't actually matter. And there's something deeper happening too. When you keep your plans silent, you're developing internal accountability. You're proving to yourself that you don't need external pressure or validation to follow through. You're building the muscle of self-discipline, the capacity to commit to something and execute it without needing cheerleaders or witnesses. That's real strength. That's the difference between someone who needs accountability partners to do anything and someone who's accountable to themselves. I know a guy who wanted to write a book. For 2 years, he told everyone he was working on it. He talked about the premise at parties. He discussed his progress on social media. He sent update emails to friends, and 2 years later, he had maybe 50 pages written. Then he met someone else who had published 3 books. When he asked this person how they did it, the answer was simple. I stopped talking about writing and started writing. I told no one, I just wrote every day. And when the first draft was done, then I mentioned it. That's the difference. One person needed the validation of others knowing he was a writer. The other just quietly became one. The man who announces his plans is creating accountability to the wrong people. He's making himself answerable to friends, family, social media followers, people who have no real stake in his success and no authority to judge his progress. The man who keeps his plans silent is accountable only to himself and to reality. Either he does the work or he doesn't. Either the results materialize or they don't. No one to make excuses to, no one to explain himself to, just him and his commitment. Seneca advised, let your progress become your proof. Not your promises, not your announcements, your actual, tangible, undeniable progress. That's what earns respect. That's what can't be argued with. Anyone can talk about what they're going to do. The man who keeps quiet and then shows up with results, that man is rare. That man is dangerous, because he's demonstrated that his word to himself is stronger than his need for external validation. So the next time you feel excited about a goal, about a plan, about a vision, feel that excitement fully. Let it fuel you, but keep it to yourself. Guard it like a secret. Protect it from the energy vampires, the doubters, the well-meaning but ultimately unhelpful opinions of people who aren't in the arena with you. Work in silence. Build in private, and when the time comes, when you have something real to show, let your results do the announcing. Let people be surprised. Let them wonder when you found the time, how you developed the discipline, why they didn't see it coming. That surprise, that gap between their perception and your reality, that's the signature of a man who knows how to move with power. Talk less, do more. Let the world catch up to what you've already become. Now, the 6th and final situation is perhaps the most difficult. It requires a level of wisdom that most men spend their entire lives developing, and yet, it's one of the most common scenarios you'll face. You know you're right, you have the facts, you have the truth, you have the logical high ground, but the person you're talking to, they're not listening, they're not open, they're dug into their position, and no amount of evidence, reasoning, or explanation is going to change their mind, and you face a choice. Do you keep trying to convince them? Do you keep presenting your case? Do you keep fighting to be acknowledged as correct? Or do you let it go? This is where most men stumble, because there's something in us, something deep and primal that needs to be recognized as right when we know we are. It feels like defeat to walk away from an argument we could win. It feels like cowardice to let someone remain wrong about something we could correct. And so we keep talking, keep explaining, keep arguing, even when we know it's futile. Even when we can see that nothing we say will make a difference. The Stoic wisdom here is brutal in its clarity. Some battles aren't worth fighting, not because you'd lose, but because winning gains you nothing. Epictetus taught that some people simply aren't ready to hear truth. Their current understanding, their current level of consciousness, their current emotional state, it makes them incapable of receiving what you're offering, even if what you're offering is absolutely correct. And when you encounter someone like this, the wise response isn't to try harder, it's to save your energy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." Sometimes the sanity is in recognizing that you can't save everyone from their own ignorance. You can't force growth on someone who isn't ready. You can't argue someone into enlightenment, and trying to do so doesn't make you noble or persistent. It makes you a fool wasting resources on an unwinnable fight. Think about the last time you got into an argument online. You presented facts. They dismissed them. You provided sources. They questioned the sources. You broke down the logic. They moved the goalposts. And 3 hours later, you were exhausted, frustrated, and they hadn't changed their position 1 millimeter. What did you gain? Nothing. What did you lose? 3 hours of your life, a significant amount of mental energy, and probably some peace of mind. Was being right worth that cost? The man who masters this 6th form of silence understands something crucial. Being right doesn't require being heard. Your correctness doesn't depend on someone else acknowledging it. The truth is the truth, whether they accept it or not. And sometimes, probably more often than you'd like, the most powerful thing you can do is let someone be wrong. There's a concept in Stoicism about choosing your battles. Not every hill is worth dying on. Not every argument is worth having. Not every wrong idea is worth correcting. You have finite energy, finite time, finite attention. And every moment you spend trying to convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced is a moment you're not spending on something that actually matters, something that's actually within your control, something that actually moves your life forward. I watched a friend destroy a relationship with his father over politics. They had opposite views, both intelligent, both passionate, both convinced they were right. And every family gathering turned into a debate. Every phone call became an argument. My friend couldn't let it go. He had to make his father see reason. He had to win the argument. And eventually, they stopped speaking. Years of silence. All because my friend couldn't accept that some minds won't change and some arguments aren't worth the cost of winning them. Compare that to someone I know who has completely opposite political views from his entire family. And he simply doesn't engage. When conversations turn to politics, he stays quiet. When people ask his opinion, he gives vague answers and changes the subject. When someone tries to bait him into an argument, he smiles and says something like, "I'm sure you're right," and walks away. Is he a coward? No, he's wise. He's recognized that winning political arguments with his family gains him nothing and costs him relationships he values. So he chooses silence. He chooses peace. He chooses to let them be wrong about whatever they want to be wrong about because his relationship with them matters more than being acknowledged as correct. That's the mark of maturity. That's the difference between a man governed by ego and a man governed by wisdom. The ego says you must be right and you must be recognized as right. Wisdom says, sometimes being at peace is more valuable than being proven correct. Seneca wrote about this extensively. He talked about how the wise man is discerning about where he spends his attention. He doesn't engage with every fool who challenges him. He doesn't correct every error he encounters. He doesn't try to educate everyone who misunderstands. Instead, he focuses on what he can actually influence, what actually matters, what actually aligns with his values and goals. Everything else, he lets it be. This doesn't mean you become passive. This doesn't mean you never stand up for truth. There are absolutely times when speaking up is necessary, when silence would be complicity, when the stakes are high enough that you must engage regardless of whether you'll win. But those situations are rarer than you think. Most of the time, most of the arguments you're tempted to have, they're not about justice or truth or principle. They're about ego. They're about being seen as smart, as right, as superior, and that's not worth your energy. The liberation that comes from letting people be wrong is profound. You stop carrying the weight of other people's ignorance. You stop feeling responsible for educating everyone who doesn't get it. You stop exhausting yourself trying to change minds that don't want to change. Instead, you invest that energy in yourself, in your growth, in your goals, in the people who actually want to learn from you, in the battles that actually matter. Being right doesn't require being heard. Your truth doesn't need someone else's validation to remain true. And sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is complete silence in the face of determined ignorance. It says your opinion of reality doesn't change reality. It says I'm not going to waste my energy trying to convince you of what I already know. It says I have better things to do than argue with someone who isn't listening. So the next time you find yourself in an argument with someone who clearly won't change their mind, take a breath. Recognize what's happening. You're about to spend energy on something that will produce no return. You're about to sacrifice peace for the temporary satisfaction of explaining why you're right to someone who doesn't care. And then make a different choice. Let them be wrong. Wish them well, even if only silently in your own mind. And walk away, not in defeat, not in frustration, but in wisdom. In the knowledge that your time, your energy, your peace, they're too valuable to waste on battles that can't be won. Save your strength for fights that matter, and let silence be your answer to those that don't. So here we are, 6 situations where silence is your ultimate weapon. When someone attacks you with anger, when critics try to provoke you, when gossip and rumors circulate, when someone else receives praise, when you're tempted to announce your plans, and when you're right but speaking won't change anything. 6 moments where weak men talk themselves into defeat and strong men stay silent and maintain power. But let's be clear about something. This isn't about never speaking. This isn't about being a doormat. This isn't about passive acceptance of everything. The Stoics weren't silent because they were weak. They were silent because they were strong enough to choose when to speak and when to stay quiet. Disciplined enough to resist the pull of ego, emotion, and social pressure. Wise enough to recognize that not every moment requires a response. The transformation from reactive to strategic, from emotional to grounded, from weak to powerful, it all starts with one realization. You don't have to respond to everything. You don't have to defend everything. You don't have to explain everything. You don't have to correct everything. You don't have to announce everything. You don't have to win everything. And the moment you accept that, the moment you internalize it, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Because a man who can't be provoked is a man who can't be controlled. A man who doesn't need validation can't be manipulated through praise or criticism. A man who moves in silence can't be stopped by people who never saw him coming. And a man who chooses his battles wisely has energy for the wars that actually matter. Marcus Aurelius spent his life fighting wars, running an empire, dealing with senators, generals, enemies both foreign and domestic. And yet, what did he write in his journals? The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Not to strike back, not to defend endlessly, but to rise above, to remain true to yourself, to let your character be your answer. That's what these 6 situations are teaching you. How to rise above, how to remain true, how to let your life be your answer when words would only weaken your position. This week, I want you to do something. Pick one of these 6 situations, just one, and commit to practicing silence when it shows up. When someone gets angry, don't defend. When someone criticizes unfairly, don't explain. When gossip circulates, don't address it. When someone else gets praised, don't interject. When you get excited about a goal, don't announce it. When you're right but it won't matter, don't argue. Pick one and practice. Because this isn't theory. This is training. This is how you build the muscle of restraint, the discipline of silence, the power of knowing when to speak and when to let your presence speak for you. Silence isn't the absence of power, it's the accumulation of it. Every time you choose not to react, you're storing energy. Every time you choose not to defend, you're building confidence in yourself that doesn't need external validation. Every time you choose not to argue, you're proving to yourself that you're governed by wisdom, not emotion. And over time, those choices compound. They turn you into someone different, someone rare, someone who walks into any room and commands respect without saying a word, someone who other men instinctively know not to test, someone who women recognize as genuinely strong, not performatively masculine. That's who you can become. Not through talking about it, but through practicing it. Not through announcing your journey, but through walking it in silence. Not through defending your transformation, but through embodying it so completely that no defense is necessary. The ancient Stoics built empires, survived slavery, advised kings, and faced death itself. And the wisdom they left us wasn't complex. It wasn't hidden. It was simple, practical, and powerful. Speak less. Choose carefully. Let silence be your strength. In a world where everyone's shouting, the quiet man stands out. In a culture where everyone's defending themselves, the man who doesn't need to is magnetic. In an age where everyone's announcing everything, the man who moves in silence is unstoppable. So go out there and practice. Let angry people exhaust themselves against your silence. Let critics reveal their own emptiness. Let gossip die of starvation. Let others have their moment in the spotlight. Let your plans remain yours until they become reality. Let people be wrong when convincing them gains you nothing. And watch what happens. Watch how your life changes. Watch how people's respect for you grows. Watch how much energy you have for things that actually matter. Watch how unshakable you become. This is the path of the Stoic. Not easy, not popular, not celebrated by the crowd, but powerful. Genuinely, undeniably powerful. And that power is yours if you're willing to embrace the silence. If this video resonated with you, if you're committed to walking this path, drop a comment right now. Tell me which of these 6 situations you struggle with most. Are you the guy who can't help but defend yourself? The one who has to announce every plan? The one who always needs to be right? Let me know, because awareness is the first step. Naming your weakness is how you begin to transform it into strength. And if you're ready to go deeper, if you want more of this raw, unfiltered Stoic wisdom that cuts through the modern noise and gives you ancient power, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is a brotherhood, a place where men come to level up, to strip away weakness, to reclaim the strength that modern culture tries to drain from us. We're building something here, a community of men who understand that real power is quiet, that real strength is disciplined, that real transformation happens in silence, not in social media posts. Remember, brother, a man who talks about doing is just planning. A man who stays silent and does is unstoppable. Be the latter. Master your mouth, master your reactions, master your need for validation, master yourself, and watch as everything else falls into place. The Stoics didn't just talk about wisdom, they lived it. And that's exactly what I'm challenging you to do. Not to watch another video about being better, but to be better. Starting right now, starting with silence, starting with the next time one of these 6 situations shows up in your life. And trust me, it will show up probably today. And when it does, you'll have a choice. React like most men, or respond like a Stoic. Choose wisely, your power depends on it.
There was a man named David who did everything right, or so he thought. He texted back within seconds, every single time. He explained his feelings in paragraphs. He shared his deepest childhood wounds on the 3rd date because someone told him, vulnerability creates connection. He was always available, always accommodating, always trying to prove his worth through words. And after 6 months of this exhausting performance, she told him something that shattered his entire understanding of relationships. You're too much. I need space. I don't think this is working. He was devastated, confused, angry even. He'd given her everything, total transparency, constant availability, emotional honesty. How could that be wrong? Here's what David didn't know. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, never felt the need to over-explain himself. Yet empresses, senators, and common people hung on his every word. Epictetus, who started his life as a slave, commanded rooms without raising his voice. Seneca, despite immense wealth and influence, understood that true power came from what you didn't say, not what you did. These men understood something profound about human psychology, about attraction, about respect, that our modern world has completely backwards. Today, I'm revealing 7 Stoic secrets that rewire how people respond to you, not manipulation, not games. Ancient masculine wisdom about presence, restraint, and the magnetic pull of a man who doesn't need constant validation. These aren't the secrets your dating coach told you. These are the principles that built empires and commanded respect for thousands of years. By the end of this video, you'll understand why silence is more powerful than explanation, why absence creates more attraction than presence, and why the less you need her approval, the more she'll seek yours. But here's the warning. The 7th secret is the one most men violate without even realizing it. And once you cross that line, attraction dies. Not slowly, instantly. If you've ever wondered why she pulled away after you opened up, why your honesty seemed to backfire, why the more you tried, the less she cared, stay with me. Because what the Stoics understood about women, about power, about human nature, is about to change everything. Let's start with the first secret. Jake made a simple mistake that cost him everything. He was 20 minutes late to dinner. Traffic was insane, his boss had kept him late, and his phone had died, so he couldn't text ahead. When he finally arrived, breathless and apologetic, she asked one question: "Where were you?" And then Jake did what most men do. He explained, in detail. He described the traffic pattern on the freeway. He mentioned his boss's last-minute request. He showed her his dead phone. He provided timestamps, locations, a complete reconstruction of his evening like he was testifying in court. He thought he was being honest, transparent, proving he had nothing to hide. What he didn't see was her face change, not with anger, with something worse, disinterest. By the time he finished his 5-minute explanation, she'd already checked out mentally. 3 weeks later, she ended it. Her reason? "You're exhausting. I feel like you're always trying to prove something." Here's the first secret the Stoics understood. The best men don't defend themselves. They don't need to. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." In modern terms, when chaos comes at you in the form of a question, an accusation, a test, matching it with frantic explanation drags you into her frame. You become the defendant, she becomes the judge, and you've already lost. The Stoic path is calibrated brevity. When she asked where he was, Jake could have said 7 words. "Traffic was terrible. I apologize for being late." Then stop. Complete stop. No elaboration, no justification, no desperate attempt to be understood. That silence after his statement isn't weakness. It's a declaration of self-possession. Here's what happens in her brain when you do this. Humans are wired for narrative. That intentional gap, that unexplained space, creates mystery. And mystery creates engagement. Her mind begins working, filling in blanks, wondering about your calm confidence. You transform from the man seeking her approval into the puzzle she wants to solve. This isn't about being evasive or dishonest. It's about understanding that over-explanation broadcasts insecurity. It screams, "I need you to believe me. I need your validation. I'm afraid of your judgment." That fear? She can smell it from across the table. The Stoics called this handing your peace to fortune. You're surrendering your internal calm to the opinion of another person. Epictetus taught that we should control what's within our power and accept what isn't. Your conscience is within your power. You know you didn't do anything wrong. Her interpretation, that's outside your control. The moment you start performing for her approval, you've given away your power. Strong men answer with precision, and then stop. They don't fill silence with nervous chatter. They don't justify, defend, or plead their case. They state the truth calmly and let it stand on its own merit. That restraint, that refusal to seek validation, is what separates men who command respect from men who beg for it. Think about the people in your life who truly command your attention. Do they explain themselves constantly? Do they justify every decision? Or do they speak with such quiet conviction that you simply believe them? That's the energy of the unexplained. It's not arrogance, it's self-contained strength. Jake lost. Her, because he didn't understand this principle. He thought honesty meant total transparency, complete explanation, a detailed account of every movement. What he didn't realize is that attraction isn't built on information. It's built on presence. And you cannot be present when you're drowning someone in explanations. So here's your first Stoic practice. Cut your explanations by half. When someone asks you a question, answer it in 1 sentence, then stop. Feel the discomfort of that silence. Resist the urge to fill it with more words, more justification, more proof. That discomfort you're feeling, that's your ego dying. Let it die. What emerges on the other side is something far more powerful. But if over-explaining pushes women away, what Jake did on their 3rd date was even worse. The second secret is about a specific type of honesty that destroys attraction faster than anything else. And most men think they're being vulnerable when they do it. It was a simple comment, almost throwaway. They were at a party, talking with friends, when Sarah mentioned another guy. "Oh, Jake from work, Yeah, he's hilarious. We went to lunch yesterday. Nothing scandalous, nothing inappropriate, just a casual mention. And Brian's world tilted. His chest tightened. Within seconds, he was asking questions. Who's Jake? Why didn't you mention lunch? Is he someone I should be worried about? His voice had that edge, that defensive, slightly accusatory tone that he tried to mask as casual curiosity. Sarah looked at him, and something in her eyes changed. Not guilt, disappointment. 2 months later, she ended it. Her reason: "You're insecure. I can't constantly reassure you that I'm not interested in other men." Brian didn't understand what happened. He thought he was protecting the relationship, setting boundaries, communicating his feelings. What he actually did was fail a test he didn't even know he was taking. Here's the third secret the Stoics understood. When a woman tests you, defending yourself is losing. These tests aren't conscious. She's not sitting there plotting ways to mess with your head, but her psychology, shaped by thousands of years of evolution, is constantly scanning for one thing: can this man handle pressure without cracking? Epictetus taught about the dichotomy of control. Some things are within your power, some things aren't. Her mentioning another man? That's outside your control. Your reaction to it? That's entirely within your control. And your reaction tells her everything she needs to know about your frame, your confidence, your emotional stability. When Brian immediately jumped to defense mode, asking questions, seeking reassurance, he broadcast loud and clear, "I'm threatened. I'm insecure. My sense of self is so fragile that a casual mention of another man's name sends me into interrogation mode." That's not masculine energy. That's fear. The Stoic response to that comment? Absolute calm. Maybe a slight smile. Maybe, "That's cool. He sounds like a good guy." And then continue the conversation like nothing significant happened. Because to a secure man, nothing significant did happen. His woman having male co-workers isn't a threat. His worth isn't dependent on her never acknowledging another man's existence. Here's what tests actually measure. They measure whether your emotional state is tied to her behavior or grounded in yourself. When you defend, you're essentially saying, "My peace of mind depends on you acting a certain way." When you remain unmoved, you're declaring, "I am my own source of strength." Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire filled with political enemies, backstabbers, and people constantly testing his authority. His response: he focused on what was within his control, his own virtue, his own actions, his own character. He didn't chase down every rumor, didn't defend against every slight, didn't justify himself to people questioning his decisions. That unshakable frame is what made him a legend. Think about the subtext of Brian's defensive questions. He's essentially asking Sarah to manage his emotions for him, to reassure him, to prove her loyalty on demand. That's exhausting, a high value. Woman doesn't want to be someone's emotional caretaker. She wants a partner who can handle uncertainty without falling apart. The paradox here is brutal but true. The more you need reassurance, the less reassuring her words become. Because you've already shown that you don't trust her, don't trust yourself, and can't handle the discomfort of not having total control and certainty. So what does the Stoic man do when tested? He notices the test. He recognizes it for what it is, a subconscious probe into his emotional stability, and he responds with calm indifference. Not cold, not distant, just unaffected. He trusts himself enough that external circumstances don't shake his internal foundation. Here's the practice. Next time something triggers that defensive impulse, that need to question, to clarify, to seek reassurance, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, is my peace of mind really threatened by this? Or is my ego just uncomfortable? Let the ego be uncomfortable. Respond from your center, not from your fear. But here's where it gets even more counterintuitive. The fourth secret isn't just about how you respond to tests. It's about your entire orientation to the relationship. And it's the secret that separates men who attract from men who chase. Daniel had been seeing Emma for 3 months. Things were good, really good. But lately he'd noticed a shift. Her texts were shorter, plans were harder to make. The anxiety started creeping in. So Daniel did what seemed logical. He tried harder. More compliments, more texts checking in, more elaborate date plans, more words of affirmation. He was fighting to keep something he could feel slipping away, and the harder he fought, the faster she pulled back. Until one evening, she sat him down and said words that destroyed him. "I need space. This feels too intense. I think we should take a break." Daniel spent the next week in agony. He texted her long messages about how much he cared. He explained that he'd give her space, but he'd be waiting. He essentially communicated, "My happiness depends on you coming back. Without you, I'm not okay." She never came back. Here's the fourth secret, and it's the most counterintuitive one yet. The moment you need the relationship to work out, you've already lost it. The Stoics practiced something called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. They would imagine the worst possible outcome, sit with it, accept it, and then act from a place of freedom rather than fear. If you can truly accept the possibility that she might walk away, that the relationship might end, that you might be alone, then you stop performing. You stop contorting yourself into shapes you don't naturally inhabit. You stop trying to talk her into staying. And paradoxically, that's when you become most attractive. Neediness is the universal repellent. It doesn't matter how good-looking you are, how successful, how intelligent. The moment she senses that your emotional stability depends on her staying, attraction dies. Because neediness signals one thing: you don't believe you're enough on your own. Think about what Daniel actually communicated with his behavior. Every extra text, every elaborate date plan, every reassurance he offered was saying, "Please don't leave me. I need you to validate my worth. I'm not complete without you." That's not partnership, that's dependency. And no woman wants to be someone's entire source of happiness. Marcus Aurelius lost children, friends, allies. He faced constant political threats and personal betrayals. Yet he maintained his equanimity because he understood something fundamental. External circumstances are temporary and outside his control. His happiness came from within, from living according to his principles, from his character, not from whether people stayed or left. Here's the brutal practice. Imagine her leaving, right now. Picture your phone staying silent. Picture her with someone else. Picture yourself alone. Don't just think about it intellectually. Feel it. Sit with that discomfort until your breathing steadies, until you realize, deep in your bones, that you would survive, that you would adapt, that you would eventually be okay. Only when you've truly accepted that worst-case scenario can you enter the relationship from a place of genuine strength, because now your actions aren't motivated by fear of loss. They're motivated by authentic desire to connect. There's a massive difference. When you're detached from the outcome, something magical happens. You speak only when your words genuinely improve the silence. You contribute value, not seek validation. You're present when you're together, but you're equally fulfilled when you're alone. That energy, that self-sufficiency, is magnetic. Women have incredible intuition. They can sense when a man's happiness is contingent on their response. They can feel the weight of being someone's everything, and that weight kills desire. but they can also sense when a man is whole on his own, when he's choosing to be with her rather than needing to be with her. That's the energy that creates lasting attraction. Epictetus, who spent his early life as a slave, understood freedom better than most. He taught that true freedom comes from wanting what you have, not having what you want. Applied to relationships. Be with someone because you genuinely enjoy their company, not because you need them to complete you. Daniel lost Emma the moment he made his happiness dependent on her staying. If he had accepted the possibility of loss, if he had remained grounded in his own worth, if he had continued living his purpose regardless of her distance, there's a good chance she would have come back. Because detachment isn't coldness, it's confidence, and confidence is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Here's your practice. Every morning, remind yourself that you are whole, complete, valuable, with or without her. Let that truth sink into your bones. Act from that place of fullness, not from a place of lack. But detachment is only half the equation. The fifth secret is about what you choose to reveal about yourself. And it's where most men make a fatal mistake. First date. The conversation was flowing. Alex felt the connection building. So when she asked about his past relationships, about his dreams, about his childhood, he opened up. Completely. He told her about his failed business venture, his complicated relationship with his father, his travel plans for the next 5 years, his insecurities about his career, his workout routine, his favorite books, his political views, everything. By the end of the night, she knew more about Alex than some of his closest friends. He thought he was building intimacy through honesty. He drove home feeling good, confident he'd made a real connection. She never texted back. Alex couldn't understand it. The conversation had been great. They'd talked for hours. He'd been totally authentic, holding nothing back. What went wrong? Here's the fifth secret the Stoics understood. Scarcity creates value. When everything is immediately available, nothing is precious. Seneca, despite his immense wealth, chose to live simply for periods of time. He did this to remind himself that luxury was optional, that true value came from restraint and self-mastery. He understood that abundance without scarcity breeds contempt. Apply this to personal disclosure. When you reveal everything about yourself on the first date, you eliminate mystery, you remove intrigue, you give her brain nothing to work with, nothing to imagine, nothing to wonder about. The story is complete. There are no chapters left to discover, and humans are wired for narrative. We're drawn to stories that unfold over time, not stories that are dumped on us all at once. Think about your favorite TV series. What keeps you watching? The slow reveal, the mysteries that build, the questions that get answered gradually. Imagine if the first episode gave you every plot point, every character backstory, every twist and turn. You'd stop watching. There's nothing left to discover. That's what Alex did. He gave her the entire season in one episode, and her brain, designed to seek novelty and invest in gradual discovery, simply lost interest. There was no reason to come back. She already knew everything. The E. Stoic man parcels out his story strategically, not because he's playing games, but because he understands that connection is built on gradual investment. One meaningful childhood memory per month. One significant life challenge revealed when trust has been earned. One dream shared when the relationship has proven its worth. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, remained private about many aspects of his life. His meditations, the closest thing we have to his inner thoughts, weren't meant for public consumption. They were private reflections. He understood that maintaining some level of mystery, some unrevealed depth, was essential to maintaining respect and authority. When you ration your personal narrative, something powerful happens. She begins to invest her imagination. She wonders what else you've experienced. She creates stories about your character based on limited information. And once she's invested mental and emotional energy into understanding you, she values you more. That's basic psychology. We value what we work for, not what's freely given. This isn't about being secretive or dishonest. It's about being selective. It's about recognizing that your life story has value, and value requires scarcity. When someone asks about your past, you don't lie, but you also don't unload your autobiography. You give them a chapter, not the whole book. Here's what this looks like practically. She asks about your childhood. Instead of a 30-minute monologue, you say, "It was complicated, but those challenges taught me resilience." There's a lot there, but that's a conversation for another time when we know each other better. That response does three things. It acknowledges the question, it hints at depth without revealing everything, and it creates anticipation for future conversations. Every relationship that lasts is built on layers. First dates cover surface-level interests. Third dates explore values and perspectives. 6 months in, you share meaningful vulnerabilities. A year in, you reveal deep insecurities. That pacing honors the natural progression of trust and intimacy. Alex robbed the relationship of that progression. By revealing everything immediately, he collapsed all the layers into one overwhelming dump. And the human brain, overwhelmed and understimulated at the same time, simply checked out. But there's something even more powerful than what you reveal. It's about what you do when you're not around. The sixth secret is the most counterintuitive of all. They'd been on 3 incredible dates. The chemistry was undeniable. The conversation flowed effortlessly. Kevin felt like he'd finally found something real. So naturally, he texted her every day. Good morning messages, check-ins throughout the day, funny memes, articles he thought she'd like. By the end of week 2, they'd exchanged hundreds of messages, and then something strange happened. Her responses got shorter, less enthusiastic. The spark that had been so electric in person seemed to fade over text. Kevin panicked and did what felt natural. He increased his efforts. More messages, more attempts to engage, more trying to recreate that initial connection. She ghosted him. Kevin was devastated and confused. They'd had such a strong connection. He'd been attentive, available, interested. How could constant communication be wrong? Here's the sixth secret. The Stoics understood. Absence amplifies attraction. Presence, especially constant digital presence, diminishes it. Marcus Aurelius spent 10 years leading military campaigns on the frontiers of Rome. His prolonged absence wasn't just about warfare, it was masterful psychology. His absence kept rivals uncertain and citizens appreciating him more. When he returned, Rome didn't take him for granted. They valued him because his presence wasn't guaranteed. The modern man makes a fatal error. He thinks constant availability demonstrates interest and builds connection. But what it actually does is eliminate tension, remove mystery, and communicate that he has nothing better to do than wait for her response. Think about what Kevin's constant texting communicated. It said, "I'm always available. My life isn't full, enough to occupy my attention. I'm waiting for you to validate my existence with your responses. I don't have a purpose beyond this connection. That's not attractive. That's suffocating." Contrast that with strategic absence. After those 3 great dates, imagine if Kevin had sent one text. "Had a great time. I'm heading out of town this weekend with friends. Talk to you next week." Then complete radio silence. No breadcrumb texts, no social media updates, just absence. What happens in her mind during that vacuum? She replays the dates. She wonders what he's doing. She notices the space where his attention used to be. She might even miss him. Her imagination fills the void, often with narratives more compelling than reality. And when he returns on Monday, calm and grounded, not explaining or justifying, just genuinely glad to reconnect, his value has increased. But here's the critical distinction. Strategic absence only works when you leave on a high note. If you disappear after an argument or a negative interaction, your absence reads as sulking or punishment. The Stoic understands that every action must be rooted in self-possession, not manipulation. Seneca practiced voluntary discomfort. He would periodically remove himself from luxury to remind himself it was optional. He understood that absence and scarcity breed appreciation. What's always available becomes background noise. What's occasionally absent becomes valued. This isn't about playing hard to get. That's manipulation rooted in insecurity. This is about having a life so full, so purposeful, so engaging that constant communication isn't possible or necessary. When you disappear to train for something, to work on a project, to spend quality time with friends, that absence is authentic. It's not a tactic, it's a byproduct of a rich, multifaceted life. Women are perceptive. They know the difference between a man who's strategically unavailable and a man who's genuinely busy building something meaningful. The first feels manipulative, the second feels magnetic. Here's the practice. After meaningful in-person time, together take intentional breaks from digital communication, not as punishment, not as a game, but because you have other priorities, other pursuits, other aspects of life that deserve your attention. When you do reconnect, be fully present. Quality over quantity. Kevin's mistake was making himself a constant, presence without substance. Every text was an attempt to maintain connection, but connection without tension is just noise. The Stoic creates natural ebb and flow, presence, then absence, engagement, then space, intensity, then calm. That rhythm keeps attraction alive. It prevents the relationship from becoming stale or taken for granted, and it communicates something powerful. I value you, but my life doesn't revolve around you. But all of this, all 6 secrets, collapse without the 7th. This is the secret that ties everything together, and it's the one most men violate without even realizing it. The 7th secret isn't just about women, it's about your entire existence. Tom had everything going for him, a decent job, good friends, hobbies he enjoyed. Then he met Rachel, and slowly, imperceptibly, everything else faded into the background. He stopped going to the gym because she didn't work out. He cancelled plans with friends to be available for her. His side business project sat untouched because evenings were for her. His dreams, his goals, his identity, all of it gradually dissolved until his entire world revolved around one person. For the first few months, Rachel seemed to appreciate the attention. But then something shifted. She started making comments. "Don't you have your own things to do? You should hang out with your friends more. What happened to that business you were starting?" Tom didn't understand. He'd made her his priority. He'd shown her she was the most important thing in his life. Isn't that what women want? 6 months in, she ended it. Her reason gutted him. "I fell in love with someone who had a life. Now you're just someone who revolves around mine. I don't want to be your whole world. It's too much pressure." Here's the 7th and most critical secret the Stoics understood. The moment you make another person your life's purpose, you become a burden to them and a stranger to yourself. The Stoics lived for virtue, for contribution, for mastery of their craft. External relationships were valuable, but they were additions to an already complete life, not the foundation of it. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome, but his purpose transcended any single relationship. He was committed to philosophy, to justice, to the well-being of the empire. His wife was important, but she wasn't his reason for existence. That independence, that self-sufficiency, that internal purpose is what made him worthy of respect and attraction. Think about what Tom communicated when he abandoned everything for Rachel. He essentially said, "I don't have anything meaningful in my life beyond you. My dreams aren't compelling enough to pursue. My friendships aren't valuable enough to maintain. My purpose isn't strong enough to command my attention. You are all I have." That's not love. That's dependency. And dependency is suffocating. When you make someone your entire world, you place an impossible burden on them. They become responsible not just for their own happiness, but for yours as well. Every time they want space, they're denying you your sole source of fulfillment. Every time they prioritize something else, they're essentially destroying your world. No person can carry that weight. And more importantly, no person wants to. Women are drawn to men who are building something. Men who have a mission that transcends the relationship. Men whose days are structured around compelling goals and meaningful pursuits. Not because these men are emotionally unavailable, but because they're fundamentally engaged with life itself. When Rachel met Tom, he was working on a business. He had friends he valued. He had a gym routine that grounded him. He was a complete person inviting her into an already vibrant life. That version of Tom was attractive because he had substance, direction, purpose. He wasn't looking for someone to complete him. He was looking for someone to complement an already fulfilling existence. But the Tom who emerged 6 months later was hollow, an empty vessel waiting to be filled by her presence. And that transformation from self-possessed to dependent killed her attraction faster than any other mistake he could have made. Epictetus taught that we should focus on what's within our control. Your purpose, your growth, your contribution to the world, these are within your control. Her feelings, her decisions, her level of investment, these are not. When you make her your purpose, you've oriented your entire life around something you cannot control. That's not just unattractive, it's psychologically devastating. Here's the brutal truth. The version of you she fell for had a life, passions, goals, friends, commitments. That version was attractive because he was already whole. The moment you abandon all of that to focus solely on her, you become someone else, someone needier, someone smaller, someone less interesting, and she didn't sign up for that person. The Stoic path is to build your life around virtue and purpose. Relationships are beautiful additions, but they're not the foundation. You train your body not to impress her, but because physical excellence is a virtue. You build your business not to provide for her, but because creation and contribution are meaningful. You maintain friendships not to show her you're social, but because deep connections with other humans enrich your life. When your life is structured this way, something powerful happens. You're not inviting her to be your everything. You're inviting her to be part of something already extraordinary. The pressure is off. She's not responsible for your happiness. She gets to add to it, not create it from nothing. And paradoxically, that's when relationships thrive, when both people are complete on their own, choosing to share their lives rather than needing to merge them. When you have a silent purpose, a mission that commands your attention and energy, her presence becomes a beautiful bonus, not a desperate necessity. Tom lost Rachel the day he made her his world. If he had maintained his business, his friendships, his gym routine, his identity, she would have felt drawn to be part of that world, not burdened by being all of it. Here's your practice. Identify your mission. What are you building? What are You mastering. What legacy are you creating? If the honest answer is nothing beyond this relationship, then you've already lost. Start today. Pick one thing that matters to you beyond any romantic connection. Commit to it. Build it. Let it occupy your time and attention. When you're busy forging yourself into something greater, silence isn't a tactic. It's your natural state. Your focus is elsewhere, and women notice. They see a man engaged with life itself, and they want to be part of that life, not the center of it, part of it. The seventh secret is the foundation for all the others, because when you have purpose, you don't over-explain, you don't trauma dump seeking validation, you don't defend yourself against tests, you're detached from outcomes, you naturally reveal yourself slowly, your absence is genuine. All of it flows from this one truth: your life has meaning beyond any single relationship. Now let me show you what happens when you combine all 7 secrets. Now imagine this version of yourself. She asks why you were late. You answer in 7 words and stop. No defense, no justification, just calm statement and silence. She mentions another man's name. You smile slightly, completely unmoved, because your worth isn't threatened by her acknowledging other humans exist. She hasn't texted back in 6 hours. You don't panic because your emotional state isn't tied to her response time. You're busy with your purpose. When you do see her, you're fully present, engaged, interested, but you're not performing. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not seeking validation. You're simply there, grounded in yourself, offering your presence without neediness. When she asks about your past, you share one meaningful story, not your autobiography, one chapter. And then you redirect the conversation, asking about her experience, her perspective. She leaves that date wanting to know more, not overwhelmed by knowing everything. After 3 intense dates, you disappear for a weekend, not because you're playing games, but because you have friends to see, a project to work on, a life that existed before her and will continue regardless of her. You return Monday, calm and refreshed, with no over-explanation. This is what the integrated Stoic looks like. A man who answers but doesn't defend, who shares but doesn't dump, who's present but not dependent, who creates space naturally, who has purpose beyond any relationship, every secret working in harmony. What does she experience? A man who is simultaneously engaged and independent, open yet mysterious, available yet not needy, present yet self-contained. That polarity, that balance, is magnetic. It's what Marcus Aurelius embodied, what Epictetus taught, what Seneca practiced. This isn't about manipulation or tactics. It's about genuine self-mastery. It's about being so grounded in your own worth, so committed to your own purpose, so comfortable with uncertainty, that external validation becomes optional rather than necessary. The Stoics understood something profound. Attraction isn't created through effort. It's created through presence combined with self-possession. When you stop trying to make her like you and start simply being someone worth liking, everything changes. Think about the people who command your respect and attention. Do they chase your approval? Do they explain themselves constantly? Do they make you the center of their world? Or do they have such quiet conviction, such clear purpose, such internal strength that you naturally gravitate toward them? That's the energy you're cultivating, not through external techniques, but through internal transformation. Every secret we've covered is ultimately about the same thing: mastering yourself so that external circumstances, including her response, don't control your internal state. When you operate from this place, relationships transform. They're no longer sources of anxiety and neediness. They become spaces of genuine connection between two complete people. She's not completing you, she's complementing you. And that's the only foundation for lasting attraction. The man who loses women through over-explaining, trauma dumping, defensive reactions, neediness, oversharing, constant presence, and lack of purpose. That's a man who hasn't done the internal work, who's looking outward for validation that can only come from within. The man who naturally embodies these 7 secrets. That's a man who's done the work, who knows his worth, who has purpose, who doesn't need external validation because his internal foundation is solid. That transformation doesn't happen overnight. It requires practice, awareness, and commitment. But every step toward that version of yourself makes you not just more attractive to women, but more respected by everyone and more at peace with yourself. Now let me warn you about the most common mistakes men make when trying to apply these secrets. Here's where most men fail when they try to implement these secrets. They turn wisdom into weaponry. They use silence to manipulate rather than to master themselves. And that approach always backfires. First pitfall, using strategic absence to provoke jealousy. You disappear not because you're living your life, but because you want her to feel anxious, to wonder, to chase. She will sense this immediately. Women have incredible intuition for distinguishing authentic behavior from manipulation. When absence is manufactured to control her reaction, it reeks of insecurity. When absence is natural because you're genuinely engaged with your purpose, it's attractive. The litmus test is simple. Are you silent to control her reaction, or are you silent to govern your own internal state? The first destroys trust. The second builds respect. Second pitfall, overcorrection. You've been the over-explaining, constantly available, emotionally dependent guy. You learn these secrets and suddenly you become a stone wall, completely shut down. No vulnerability, no warmth, no genuine sharing. You've gone from one extreme to the other. Mystery needs windows, or people assume the house is abandoned. The Stoic isn't emotionally unavailable. He's emotionally selective. He shares, but with intention. He's vulnerable, but at appropriate times with earned trust. There's a massive difference between being measured and being closed off. Balance is the key. Offer one genuine compliment per date. Not a barrage of flattery, but one specific, observed appreciation. Share one meaningful thought or experience, but not your entire psychological history. Be present and engaged when you're together, but maintain your life and purpose when you're apart. Third pitfall, applying these secrets from a place of fear rather than abundance. You're not over-explaining because you're confident in your truth. You're not over-explaining because you're terrified she'll leave if you say the wrong thing. That fear leaks through everything you do. She'll feel it. These secrets only work when they flow from genuine self-possession, not from desperate attempts to prevent loss. If you're detached from the outcome because you've truly accepted that you'd be fine either way, that's powerful. If you're pretending to be detached while internally panicking, that's transparent. Fourth pitfall, using these as tricks in an otherwise unchanged life. You start spacing out your texts and maintaining mysterious silence, but you still have no purpose, no mission, no life beyond the relationship. You're just a needy guy who's learned to temporarily mask his neediness. The Stoics weren't performing, they were being. These principles worked for them because they were expressions of who they actually were, not techniques layered on top of insecurity. If you want these secrets to work, you have to become the kind of man for whom they're natural expressions, not calculated moves. Fifth pitfall, forgetting that relationships require genuine care and investment. These secrets aren't about being cold, distant, or uncaring. They're about being grounded, purposeful, and self-possessed, while still showing up fully for someone you care about. The Stoic man doesn't refuse to explain himself because he doesn't care what she thinks. He doesn't explain because he trusts in his own integrity and doesn't need external validation. See the difference? One is rooted in contempt. The other is rooted in self-respect. When applied correctly, these secrets don't create distance. They create healthy space. They don't reduce intimacy. They make intimacy more meaningful when it happens. They don't communicate lack of care. They communicate self-respect and invite mutual respect. The goal isn't to become an emotionless robot, calculating every interaction. The goal is to become so grounded in your own worth and purpose that these behaviors become natural, authentic expressions of who you are. Now let me give you a practical challenge that will make these secrets automatic. Here's your challenge for the next 7 days. This single practice will transform how you communicate and how people respond to you. For the next week, log every sentence you speak to women. Whether it's a romantic interest, a colleague, a friend, doesn't matter. Track it. You can do this mentally if you're disciplined, or for maximum impact, write it down at the end of each day. Then perform an audit. Go through everything you said and cut out any sentence that sought validation, explained unnecessarily, justified your actions, repeated something for emphasis, or defended yourself without being directly challenged. Count how many sentences survive. Your goal is to reduce your word count by 30% by the end of the week. This isn't about being rude or withholding. It's about eliminating the psychological leakage, the insecure chatter that dilutes your presence and undermines your frame. Day 1, you'll be shocked at how much you say that serves no purpose except to seek approval or manage someone else's perception. Day 3, you'll start catching yourself mid-sentence. Day 5, the silence will feel more comfortable. By day 7, you will have fundamentally rewired how you communicate. And here's what you'll notice. The space you create through intentional silence generates a different kind of energy. People lean in more. They listen more carefully. They value your words more because they're not drowning in them. That tension, that deliberate economy of speech, is often more powerful than any words you could say. Track 3 specific metrics. First, how many times did you over-explain when a simple answer would have sufficed? Second, how many times did you share information seeking validation rather than contributing value? Third, how many times did you defend yourself against questions that weren't actually attacks? Those 3 patterns, over-explaining, validation-seeking, and unnecessary defending, account for probably 70% of the words that undermine your attraction and respect. Cut them, and you've transformed your entire presence. By Friday, you'll feel different, calmer, more centered, more self-possessed. You'll have stopped leaking energy on words that serve no real purpose, and women will feel it. The shift will be palpable. Conversations will have more weight. Your silence will command attention. Your words will land with impact. This isn't theory. This is practical transformation. 7 days. Track, audit, cut. That's it. Simple, but not easy. Because you'll be fighting every conditioning you've received about communication, about sharing, about proving yourself through words. But here's the truth the Stoics understood. Most talk is noise. Most explanation is insecurity. Most words dilute rather than amplify. The man who speaks less but means more commands the room. The man who can sit in silence without discomfort projects strength. The man whose words are scarce becomes someone people actually listen to. So take the challenge. 7 days, 30% reduction, and watch how everything changes. But there's one more thing. One single sentence that will make this magnetic silence automatic and effortless. Here is the single sentence that makes everything we've covered automatic. Every morning, before you engage with the world, before you pick up your phone, before you interact with anyone, recite this. My worth is non-negotiable. Explanations are optional. Say it out loud. Put it in your phone as a daily reminder. Write it on a card you see every morning. Let it sink into your subconscious. Because when you truly internalize that your value is inherent, not contingent on external validation, the compulsive need to justify yourself simply quiets down. Explaining becomes a choice, a conscious decision to add clarity when it serves mutual understanding, not a desperate reflex born from fear of judgment. That single shift, that one reframe, rewires every interaction that follows. Your worth is non-negotiable. You don't have to earn it through perfect explanations. You don't have to prove it through constant availability. You don't have to defend it against every test. It simply is. And explanations? Optional. You can offer them when appropriate, but you don't owe them to anyone as proof of your value. Let's bring this full circle. Remember David from the beginning? The man who texted back instantly, explained everything in paragraphs, shared his deepest wounds early, and made her his entire world. He lost her because he violated every single secret we've covered. But imagine a different David, one who answers questions briefly and calmly, who processes his pain privately before sharing it intentionally, who remains unmoved by tests because his frame is solid, who's detached from outcomes because he knows he's complete on his own, who shares his story gradually, creating intrigue, who disappears naturally because he's building something meaningful, who has a purpose that transcends any relationship. That David doesn't lose her, because the David isn't performing for her approval. He's living from a place of genuine self-mastery, and that energy, that quiet strength, that self-contained power is what attraction is actually built on. You now have the blueprint, 7 Stoic secrets that ancient men understood and modern men have forgotten, the strength of the unexplained. Never trauma dumping early, stopping defensive reactions, detaching from outcomes, revealing yourself slowly, using strategic absence, building purpose beyond relationships. These aren't tricks. They're pillars of character that people instinctively recognize as solid. When you embody them, you stop chasing attraction and start commanding it. You stop seeking respect and start earning it naturally. You stop performing and start simply being someone worth knowing. Speak less, mean more, live with purpose, and watch as women, respect, and genuine connection flow toward you rather than away from you. The next move is yours. This isn't theoretical philosophy. This is practical transformation. Apply just one of these secrets this week. Choose the one that hit hardest. Put it into practice. Then come back and tell me what happened in the comments. If this video shifted something in you, share it with a friend who's still stuck in the cycle of over-explaining and underliving. Comment below which secret resonated most. I read every early comment because your engagement fuels this mission. Subscribe for weekly Stoic wisdom on relationships, purpose, and masculine development. The next video breaks down the specific words that destroy attraction and the exact phrases that build it. You won't want to miss it. Until next time, remember what the Stoics knew. True power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't defend itself. It simply is. Choose silence. Choose self-mastery. Choose strength. Now close this video, put down your phone, and go build something that matters. Rome wasn't built by men who double-texted. Neither is the life you actually want. You're sitting across from someone you trusted, a business partner maybe, or someone you thought was close. The conversation feels off, like walking through fog where nothing is quite solid. They ask a question, something that sounds innocent enough, but the moment it leaves their lips, you feel it. A shift, a pressure. Your chest tightens. Your mind starts racing, trying to defend yourself against an accusation that was never actually made. And before you know it, you're the one explaining yourself, justifying your thoughts, questioning. Whether you're crazy for even noticing something was wrong in the first place, that's not an accident, that's manipulation. And it happens through the most dangerous weapon a liar can wield, the question. Here's what most people don't understand. Manipulators don't need grand schemes or elaborate lies. They don't need to convince you of anything dramatic. All they need is the right question at the right moment, delivered with the perfect mix of innocence and accusation, and suddenly you're dancing to their tune without even realizing the music started. Studies show that the average person encounters manipulative tactics multiple times a day: workplace, relationships, social media, even casual conversations, and most never recognize what's happening. They feel the discomfort. They sense something's wrong, but they can't name it. They can't defend against what they can't see. The ancient Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. These men didn't just philosophize about virtue in ivory towers. They lived in a world of political intrigue, betrayal, and deception that would make today's drama look tame. And they developed something powerful, a framework for staying unshakable when everyone around you is trying to shake you. Because here's the truth: when you understand how manipulation works, when you can recognize the questions designed to control you, you become immune. Not cold, not paranoid, just clear, unshakably clear. And that clarity is freedom. By the end of what I'm about to share with you, you'll be able to spot these 5 manipulative questions the moment they're asked. More importantly, you'll know exactly how to respond with the kind of calm authority that makes manipulators powerless. So let's begin. Before we break down the 5 specific questions liars use, you need to understand why questions are such effective weapons. Think about how conversations work. When someone makes a statement, you can challenge it, you can disagree, you can demand proof. But questions shift the burden. They put you in a position where you have to defend, explain, justify. They create an immediate power dynamic where the questioner controls the frame and you're left scrambling to respond. This is psychological warfare disguised as innocent curiosity. A liar knows that if they say you're too sensitive, you might push back. But if they ask, "Why are you so sensitive?" suddenly you're in defense mode, trying to prove you're not sensitive, which ironically makes you look more sensitive. The question itself becomes the trap. And here's the really insidious part. These questions are designed to make you doubt yourself. They exploit what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling when your reality doesn't match what someone else is telling you it should be. So you start questioning your own perceptions, your own memories, your own sanity. And the moment you doubt yourself, you've given them control. Marcus Aurelius wrote something profound in his Meditations. He said, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." The Stoics understood that external events and external people have no power over your inner fortress unless you grant them that power. And manipulation only works when you forget this fundamental truth. The manipulator's question isn't reality. It's their attempt to shape your reality. But you get to choose whether to accept that frame or stand in your own. So the Stoic principle here is simple but revolutionary. What's within your control? Your perception, your judgment, your response. What's outside your control, their behavior, their questions, their attempts to manipulate. When Epictetus taught his students, he drilled this into them relentlessly. Focus only on what's yours. Let go of the rest. Because the moment you try to control external things, you become a slave to them. But when you master yourself, when you control your reactions and maintain your own frame of reality, you become unshakable. Now, let's get into the 5 questions and how to defend against each one with Stoic precision. The first manipulative question liars use is devastatingly simple. Why are you so sensitive? Think about the last time someone said this to you, or something close to it. Maybe it was, you're overreacting, or why do you always take things personally? On the surface, it sounds like concern. It sounds like they're trying to help you see that you're getting worked up over nothing. But here's what's really happening. They're reframing your very valid observation or concern as a character flaw. You noticed something was off. Maybe they contradicted themselves. Maybe their story didn't add up. Maybe you felt that instinctive gut reaction that something wasn't right. And instead of addressing your concern, they flipped it. Now the problem isn't their behavior. The problem is your sensitivity. This is classic gaslighting, and it's one of the most effective manipulation tactics because it attacks your confidence in your own perception. Let me give you a real scenario. Imagine a business partnership where the numbers aren't adding up. You notice discrepancies in the accounts, small ones at first, then bigger. You bring it up casually saying, "Hey, I noticed these expenses don't match what we discussed." And instead of addressing it, your partner leans back, gives you that look and says, "Why are you so suspicious? Why can't you just trust the process? You're being paranoid." Now, if you're not careful, you'll spend the next 20 minutes defending yourself, proving you're not suspicious, explaining that you trust them but just want clarity. And while you're doing that, the actual issue, those discrepancies in the accounts, gets buried. The question itself derailed the entire conversation. That's the power of this manipulation. So what's really happening psychologically? The manipulator is making you responsible for their wrongdoing. They're shifting the emotional burden. You came with a legitimate concern about their behavior. They've now made it about your emotional state. And if you accept that frame, if you start explaining why you're not too sensitive, you've already lost. You've validated the premise of their question. But here's where the Stoics give us something powerful. Epictetus taught that we should be indifferent to external judgments, not cold but grounded. He said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, their question only has power if you give it power, if you accept their frame. So what's the Stoic response? Calm, direct, and anchored in your own perception. When someone asks, "Why are you so sensitive?" you don't defend, you don't explain. You simply respond with clarity. I notice what I notice. Should I not trust my own observations? See what that does? It doesn't accept their frame. It doesn't engage with whether you're sensitive or not. It redirects back to the actual issue, your observation, and it puts a question back to them. Are they suggesting you should ignore what you see? This works because it maintains your frame. You're not defensive. You're not emotional. You're simply stating a fact. You observed something. That observation stands. And now they have to deal with that, rather than you having to defend your emotional state. This is the power of Stoic composure. When you refuse to be moved by their attempts to shake you, when you stay centered in what you know to be true, the manipulation loses its grip. The second manipulative question is one you've definitely heard. Don't you trust me? This one's particularly insidious because it weaponizes relationship and emotional connection. Trust is sacred, right? It's the foundation of any meaningful relationship. So when someone demands trust, It feels like you're being the bad guy if you question them. But here's the critical distinction: earned trust versus demanded trust. Manipulators don't want to earn trust through consistent, honest behavior. That takes time and integrity. Instead, they demand trust as if it's owed to them, and they use guilt to shut down any healthy skepticism. Think about this dynamic. You notice something suspicious. Maybe they've been evasive about where they were. Maybe they've lied about small things before, and now you're starting to connect dots. So you ask a simple question, and their immediate response is, "Don't you trust me? After everything we've been through, you still doubt me." Now you're on the defensive. Because questioning them suddenly feels like betraying the relationship. And if you back down, if you say, "No, of course I trust you," you've just given them permission to continue whatever they were doing without accountability. The question itself becomes a shield against scrutiny. Here's a real scenario that plays out all the time: financial deception in relationships. One partner handles the money, and the other starts noticing withdrawals that don't make sense. They ask about it, and instead of transparency, they get, "Don't you trust me to handle our finances? Have I ever let you down?" And the person asking, who has every right to understand where shared money is going, now feels guilty for even questioning it. That guilt is the goal, because guilt silences questions, and silence allows the deception to continue. What's happening psychologically is something called a false binary. The manipulator is presenting only two options. Either you trust them completely and blindly, or you don't trust them at all. But that's not how trust actually works in healthy relationships. Real trust isn't blind. Real trust is built on consistent, transparent behavior over time. And real trust allows for questions without feeling threatened. Seneca understood this perfectly. He wrote, "No one can be happy who has been thrust outside the pale of truth." And there are two ways that one can be removed from this realm: by lying or by being lied to. The Stoics knew that truth is the foundation of peace, not comfort, not avoiding hard questions. Truth. And trust without truth is just willful blindness. So what's the Stoic response to "Don't you trust me"? Again, you don't. Accept the frame. You don't get defensive about whether you trust them or not. You simply state a principle. Trust is built through consistent behavior over time. I'm asking because I care about clarity, not because I doubt you. See what that does? It reframes trust as something earned through actions, not demanded through guilt. It removes the emotional manipulation and replaces it with a rational principle. And crucially, it maintains your right to ask questions without apologizing for it. If they're honest, they'll appreciate that you value truth enough to ask. If they're manipulating, they'll likely get defensive, which tells you everything you need to know. Either way, you stayed grounded. You didn't let their question control your response. That's Stoic strength in action. The third manipulative question is maybe the most aggressive. Are you calling me a liar? This one goes straight for the throat. It's a defensive reversal that puts you on trial for daring to question them. And it's incredibly effective because most people are conflict averse. They don't want to be seen as accusatory or confrontational. So when someone flips the script and makes you the aggressor, your natural instinct is to backpedal. Let's break down what's happening here. You've noticed inconsistencies. Their story changed between yesterday and today. Details don't line up. So you gently point it out, maybe saying, "I'm confused because you said something different earlier." And their response isn't to clarify, it's to attack. Are you calling me a liar? Is that what you think of me? Suddenly, you're no longer talking about their inconsistent story. You're talking about whether you're accusing them of lying, and that's a much more uncomfortable conversation to have, This works because it creates instant fear, fear of confrontation, fear of being wrong, fear of damaging the relationship, so you scramble to soften your position. No, I'm not saying you lied, I'm just confused, maybe I misunderstood. And in that scramble, the actual issue, the inconsistency in their story, gets completely buried. They've successfully redirected the conversation away from their behavior and onto your character. Here's a real scenario. Imagine you have a family member who borrowed money and promised to pay it back by a certain date. That date comes and goes. You bring it up and they get immediately defensive. Are you calling me a liar? You think I'm trying to steal from you? I said I'd pay you back and I will. Why are you attacking me? Now, instead of discussing when you'll get your money back, you're defending yourself against accusations of being accusatory. That's the power of this manipulation. Psychologically, this is a false equivalence. They're equating asking questions with making accusations. But these are not the same thing. Honest people don't fear questions. Honest people welcome clarity. They'll address inconsistencies by explaining them, not by attacking the person who noticed them. But liars can't afford clarity. Clarity exposes them, so they make the act of seeking clarity itself seem like an attack. Marcus Aurelius offers us wisdom here. He wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed." It is the person who continues in self-deception and ignorance who is harmed. The Stoics valued truth above comfort. They understood that being wrong and correcting course is strength, not weakness, and they modeled this by welcoming examination rather than fearing it. So what's the Stoic response to, "Are you calling me a liar"? You stay calm, you stay factual, and you don't let them make you the villain for seeking truth. A powerful response is simply this: should I be? Because honest people don't fear questions. Let that sink in for a moment. You're not saying they're a liar. You're not defending yourself against the accusation of accusing them. You're simply pointing out a truth. If they're being honest, your questions shouldn't threaten them. This response maintains your composure and flips the frame back to where it belongs. It's not about whether you're accusatory. It's about whether they have anything to hide. And by staying calm, by not getting pulled into emotional defensiveness, you demonstrate something critical. You are not moved by their attempts to intimidate or deflect. You remain grounded in seeking truth. That's Stoic power. The fourth manipulative question is subtle but deadly. Why would I lie to you? This one works by appealing to logic and relationship. History. It's making you feel foolish for even suspecting something might be wrong. Because, right, why would they lie? They have no reason to. Except, of course, they do. But this question makes you second-guess your instincts by making deception seem illogical. Let's think about how this plays out. You've discovered something, maybe a hidden expense, maybe they were somewhere they said they wouldn't be. Maybe you found a message that contradicts what they told you. You bring it up, and instead of explaining, they look at you with confusion and hurt. Why would I lie to you? What would I possibly gain from that, after everything we've been through? Together, you really think I'd deceive you? And suddenly, you're in a position where your concern seems absurd. Why would they lie? You can't think of a good enough reason, so maybe you're just paranoid. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. This is manipulation through incredulity. They're making the idea of them lying seem so ridiculous that you start doubting your own perception. But here's the truth. People lie for all kinds of reasons. To avoid consequences, to maintain an image, to cover other lies, to get what they want without conflict. The question, why would I lie, isn't actually asking for a reason. It's asserting, that no good reason exists, which is a claim, not a question. Here's a real scenario. You start noticing your romantic partner has been distant, working late more often, less communicative. You see messages on their phone that seem suspicious. You bring it up, trying to have an honest conversation, and they respond with, "Why would I lie to you? I love you. If something was wrong, don't you think I'd tell you?" And in that moment, it's easy to feel foolish. Maybe you're being paranoid. Maybe you're creating problems where none exist. But psychologically, what's happening is a logical fallacy wrapped in emotional appeal. Just because you can't immediately articulate why someone would lie doesn't mean they're not lying. And more importantly, your observation, the thing that triggered your concern in the first place, doesn't disappear just because you can't explain their motive. The facts don't change based on whether you understand their reasoning. Epictetus taught his students to focus on what's actual, not on assumptions. About why, he said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about those things." The Stoic approach is to separate what you know from what you assume. What do you know? You observed something that doesn't add up. That's a fact. What? You don't know their motivation, but you don't need to understand their motivation to trust your observation. So what's the Stoic response to, "Why would I lie to you"? You don't justify your concern. You don't try to explain their possible motives. You simply state what triggered your question. "I'm asking because something doesn't add up. Can you help me understand?" This response does something powerful. It acknowledges that you noticed a discrepancy. It invites them to provide clarity. And it doesn't accept the premise that your concern is baseless just because their motive isn't obvious. You're staying in the realm of facts, not getting lost in speculation about why. If they're being honest, they'll explain the discrepancy. If they're manipulating, they'll likely continue trying to make you feel foolish for asking. And that reaction, in itself, tells you what you need to know. The Stoic remains unmoved by attempts to confuse or shame. You stay anchored in what you observed. That's your power. The fifth and final manipulative question is perhaps the most frustrating. Can't we just move on? This is the escape hatch, the premature closure. The attempt to avoid accountability by making resolution seem like the mature thing to do. But here's the problem. You can't truly move on from something you haven't actually addressed. And that's exactly what the manipulator is counting on. This question usually comes after they've been caught in something they can't easily explain. You've confronted them. You've presented evidence. They've tried deflection, denial, maybe even some of the other questions we've already covered. And when none of that works, when you don't back down, they pivot to, "Can't we just move on? Why? Do we have to keep dwelling on this? I thought we were past this." What makes this so effective is it appeals to your desire for peace. Nobody wants to live in constant conflict. Nobody wants to be the person who won't let things go. So when someone frames moving forward as healthy and addressing the issue as dwelling, it's tempting to agree. You don't want to be difficult. You don't want to be the problem. So you agree to move on. Except you haven't resolved anything. You've just agreed to stop talking about it, and the manipulator gets exactly what they wanted: escape without consequence. Let me give you a real scenario. You discover your business partner has been taking money from the company account for personal expenses without discussing it with you. You confront them, and after some initial defensiveness, they finally admit it, but minimize it. "Okay, fine, I used some company funds for personal stuff. It wasn't that much. I'll pay it back. Can't we just move on? Why are we still talking about this?" And you're left feeling like if you push for more, a clear repayment plan, an understanding of why it happened, assurance it won't happen again, you're being unreasonable. But here's what's really happening. They want the discomfort of the conversation to end, without the discomfort of actual accountability. They want resolution without understanding. They want forgiveness without change. And the question, can't we just move on, is designed to make you feel like continuing the conversation is the problem, not their behavior that started the conversation. Psychologically, this is about comfort over truth. And the Stoics were very clear on this point. Seneca wrote, "No one can be happy who has been thrust outside the pale of truth." Moving on without truth isn't peace, it's avoidance. And avoidance breeds resentment, mistrust, and the conditions for the same behavior to happen again. Real resolution requires understanding. It requires acknowledgement. It requires often a plan for how things will be different moving forward. The Stoic perspective is that premature peace is no peace at all. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to stay committed to truth, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it would be easier to just accept things as they are and move on, because the price of false peace is living in a false reality. And eventually, that reality collapses. So what's the Stoic response to, "Can't we just move on"? You maintain your requirement for understanding. A powerful response is, "We can move forward once I understand what happened and how we'll prevent it in the future." See what that does? It's not refusing to move forward. It's clarifying what moving forward actually requires. It's insisting on truth as the foundation for peace. And it makes clear that you're not going to accept performative resolution that doesn't address the actual issue. If they're sincere about moving forward, they'll engage with that. They'll provide the understanding and assurance you're asking for. If they're manipulating, they'll get frustrated that you won't just drop it. They'll likely try to frame you as difficult or unforgiving. But the Stoic doesn't need their approval. The Stoic needs truth. And once you have that, genuine moving forward becomes possible. Now let's bring all of this together into a unified Stoic framework that makes you untouchable when it comes to manipulation. Because recognizing the 5 questions is important, but understanding the underlying principles that make you immune is what transforms you. The Stoics built their entire philosophy on 3 fundamental pillars, and when you embody these, manipulation becomes powerless against you. The first pillar is self-control, not suppression, not coldness, but the ability to govern your emotional reactions so they don't govern you. When someone asks, "Why are you so sensitive?" and you feel that spike of defensiveness, that's normal, that's human. But the Stoic practices the pause, that space between stimulus and response where you choose how you'll react. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This is what he meant. Your emotions will arise. That's not in your control. But what you do with those emotions, that's entirely yours. Manipulators target emotional reactivity. They want you flustered, defensive, confused, guilty, because in that emotional state, you're not thinking clearly, you're just reacting. But when you've trained yourself to maintain composure, when you can feel the emotion without being controlled by it, suddenly their tactics don't work. You can hear, "Don't you trust me?" and recognize it as manipulation without getting swept into guilt. You can hear, "Are you calling me a liar?" and stay grounded in your observation without getting defensive. That's power, real power, not over them, over yourself. The second pillar is clear judgment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." This is crucial. The manipulator's questions are their opinion about what you should think or feel, but they're not facts. When they ask, "Why would I lie to you?" that's not actually an argument. It's an attempt to shape your judgment. And the Stoic separates what's factual from what's opinion. What's factual? You observed an inconsistency. That's real. What's opinion? Their claim that observing inconsistencies means you're suspicious or untrusting. That's their framing. You don't have to accept it. This clarity of judgment means you stay focused on what's actual, not what they want you to believe is actual, not what would be more comfortable to believe. What is? And when you operate from that foundation of clear judgment, their attempts to distort your reality fail. They can ask manipulative questions all day. But if you're grounded in what you know to be true, those questions lose their power to move you. The third pillar is maintaining your frame. This is about psychological sovereignty. It's about recognizing that you are the author of your internal reality. Others can offer their perspectives, their questions, their frames for how you should interpret things, but you choose whether to adopt those frames or maintain your own. When someone asks, "Can't we just move on?" they're trying to impose their frame, moving on without understanding. But you can reject that frame and maintain your own. Understanding first, then moving forward. This isn't stubbornness, it's integrity. It's refusing to let other people's manipulation of language and emotion pull you off center. Seneca understood this when he wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." These manipulative questions are tests, and every time you stay grounded, every time you refuse to be moved from your center, you become stronger, not harder, not more defensive. Stronger in your ability to remain yourself regardless of external pressure. Here's what this looks like in practice. You're not trying to win arguments. You're not trying to prove you're right. You're simply unmoved. When they ask their manipulative questions, you respond with calm clarity. You don't accept their frame. You don't get defensive. You simply stay anchored in what you know and maintain your requirements for truth and understanding. And that combination, self-control, clear judgment, maintaining your frame, that makes you essentially manipulation-proof. The manipulator relies on you getting emotional, accepting their distorted version of reality, and abandoning your own perception to accommodate theirs. But when you embody these Stoic principles, none of that works. You feel the emotion, but don't react from it. You see through their distortion and stay grounded in facts. You maintain your frame despite their attempts to impose theirs. And in that state, you're free. Not because they stop trying, but because their attempts no longer affect you. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The manipulator is an outside event. Their questions are outside events. You can't control whether they ask, but you have absolute power over how you receive those questions, how you interpret them, and how you respond. That's your domain. That's your fortress. And when you build that fortress strong, nothing external can breach it. Let's be clear about something important. This isn't about being cold. It's not about being suspicious of everyone. It's not about turning into some emotionless robot who questions every interaction. The Stoics weren't advocating for isolation or cynicism. They were advocating for clear-sighted engagement with reality. Being unmanipulatable doesn't mean being unkind. It means being clear. It means trusting your observations. It means maintaining your standards for truth, even when it would be more comfortable not to. You can still be warm, open, trusting, vulnerable. In fact, the Stoics would argue you can only truly be those things when you're grounded in this kind of strength. Because vulnerability without discernment is just naivety. Trust without verification is just wishful thinking. The Stoic is both compassionate and clear, both open and discerning. It's not either or, it's both. You can love people deeply while also recognizing when they're trying to manipulate you. And recognizing it doesn't mean the relationship is over. It means you're addressing reality instead of pretending it doesn't exist. Here's the beautiful paradox. When you become unshakable in this way, when manipulative questions can't move you, you actually improve your relationships. Because you're no longer tolerating lies for the sake of peace. You're no longer accepting distorted versions of reality to avoid conflict. You're insisting on truth as the foundation, and relationships built on truth, even uncomfortable truth, are infinitely stronger than relationships built on comfortable lies. The people in your life who are honest will appreciate this about you. They'll value that you ask direct questions, that you don't accept manipulative deflection, that you maintain high standards for truth and accountability. And the people in your life who rely on manipulation, they'll either change how they interact with you, or they'll remove themselves. Either way, you win, because you're no longer carrying the weight of their deception. So where does this leave us? You now know the 5 manipulative questions liars use. Why are you so sensitive? Don't you trust me? Are you calling me a liar? Why would I lie to you? Can't we just move on? You understand what each question is designed to do, how it shifts power, how it creates doubt, how it deflects accountability. And more importantly, you have the Stoic framework for responding with unshakable clarity. You maintain self-control so you're not reactive. You exercise clear judgment so you're not confused. You hold your frame so you're not manipulated. And from that place of strength, you can engage with the world, with relationships, with difficult conversations, without losing yourself in the process. This is what the Stoics discovered 2,000 years ago, and what remains just as true today. Your power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from mastering yourself. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire. Epictetus was born a slave and became one of history's greatest teachers. Seneca advised emperors and wrote profound philosophy. These men lived through political intrigue, betrayal, war, loss, everything you can imagine. And what they all concluded was this: external circumstances cannot rob you of your internal fortress unless you let them. Lies cannot control you unless you accept them as truth. Manipulation cannot move you unless you abandon your center. So be unmoved, not unfeeling, not cold, just clear. Clear about what you observe, clear about what you know, clear about your standards and your boundaries. Let manipulative questions bounce off that clarity like waves against a rock, because that's what you are when you embody these principles. Immovable, not because you're stubborn, but because you're grounded in truth. And truth, unlike lies, never needs to manipulate. It simply is. If this resonated with you, if you recognized yourself in any of these scenarios, or you've dealt with these manipulative questions before, hit that like button. It tells me this content is serving you, and it helps more people find it. Subscribe to this channel for more Stoic wisdom that cuts through the noise and gives you practical tools for living with strength and clarity. These aren't just philosophical ideas. They're weapons you can use every single day to protect your peace, your truth, and your power. And drop a comment below. Which of these 5 questions have you encountered most? Which one hit closest to home? I read every comment, and I want to hear your experiences, because that's how we learn together. We share what we've been through. We recognize the patterns, and we support each other in standing firm. Remember this: a man who controls his mind cannot be controlled by lies. A man who knows his truth cannot be shaken by manipulation. And a man who embodies Stoic principles doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. He simply stands in his reality, clear-eyed and unshakable, Be that man. The world needs more people who can't be manipulated, more people who insist on truth, more people who remain themselves no matter what pressure they face. That's the path. That's the power. That's the promise of Stoicism. Now go walk it. The ancients believed that one question could set a person free or drive them into despair. It was not asked in the open squares of Rome, nor carved into the laws of Athens. It lived quietly in the minds of philosophers, whispered in private, written in fragile lines that survived only because someone dared to copy them again and again. The question is simple, and yet it is dangerous. What if the worst thing that could happen to you has already happened in your mind? To the Stoics, this was no game. They believed that fear feeds on surprise, that pain grows sharper when it catches us unprepared. So they trained themselves to walk willingly into imagined ruin, to see their fortunes lost, their loved ones gone, their own lives ended. Not because they were morbid, but because they believed freedom begins where fear ends. Consider the emperor Marcus Aurelius. He ruled the greatest empire of his age, commanded vast armies, and held the power of life and death. Yet at night, by candlelight, he wrote words not of conquest, but of surrender. You may leave this life at any moment. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. Why would the most powerful man alive remind himself of his own fragility? Because he knew that power means nothing if the soul is ruled by terror. Think also of Epictetus, born into slavery, his body broken, his freedom denied. He had nothing, and yet he claimed to be freer than his masters. His secret was not wealth or status, but the practice of imagining loss until it no longer frightened him. He learned that when you accept the worst in thought, you cannot be enslaved by it in reality. This thought experiment, called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, was their weapon. It stripped misfortune of its surprise. It turned tragedy into training, but it was also dangerous. Used wrongly, it could lead to cold detachment or reckless despair. Used rightly, it gave men the courage to face storms that would break others. Tonight, we enter that world. We walk alongside emperors and exiles, soldiers and slaves. We step into the experiment that promised unshakable calm, if one dared to face it. Stay with this journey, for once you see as they saw, you may never look at your own life the same way again. As the candle burns low and the night begins to fade, we return to the question that haunted the Stoics. What if every disaster that could befall you has already happened in your mind? What if you rehearsed the losses, walked through the ruins, tasted the bitterness, and in doing so discovered that you could still stand? The experiment is not meant to darken your life. It is meant to free it, to look at death so that you may live, to imagine loss so that you may love, to accept fate so that you may act with courage while you still have time. Think of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled with armies at his command, and yet reminded himself each morning of mortality and betrayal. His greatness was not in conquest, but in calm, in refusing to be ruled by fear. Think of Epictetus, the slave who owned nothing, yet declared that nothing could enslave his mind. His power was not in possessions, but in freedom of spirit. Think of Seneca, rich and influential, yet sleeping on the floor to prove to himself that fortune could never own him. His wisdom was not in comfort, but in clarity. These men lived in an age of plagues, wars, and political chaos. We live in an age of noise, speed, and uncertainty. Their struggles were different in detail, but not in kind. Like them, we will lose. Like them, we will die. The only question is whether we will face these truths with trembling or with steadiness. The Stoic experiment offers a choice. You can avert your eyes from fear, pretending it is not there, and live in quiet dread. Or you can walk into it willingly, meet it in imagination, and rob it of its power. When you do, you discover the strange paradox the Stoics cherished. By imagining death, you begin to live. By picturing loss, you awaken gratitude. By embracing fate, you find freedom. Pause for a moment. Picture the one thing you fear losing most. The job, the fortune, the health, the person. Picture it gone. Feel the hollow space it would leave. Now open your eyes to the truth. It is still here. For now, that is the miracle. That is the gift. And because it is fragile, it deserves your full attention. This is why the thought experiment matters. Not to numb you, but to awaken you. Not to make you indifferent, but to make you urgent. When you remember that life can be stripped away in a breath, every breath becomes precious. When you recall that time is slipping past, every moment becomes an opportunity. And when you realize that nothing external is truly yours, you begin to live with the strength that comes from owning yourself. The Stoics cannot walk this path for you. They can only point the way. Marcus, Epictetus, Seneca, they left fragments, reminders, hints. But the experiment must be lived, not merely studied. It must be practiced quietly in the solitude of your own mind until the fear loosens and the gratitude deepens. So let this be your invitation. Tonight, before sleep, close your eyes and step into the exercise. Imagine the loss. Imagine the end. Let yourself feel it. And then awaken tomorrow with new eyes, seeing what remains not as ordinary, but as extraordinary. This is the gift the Stoics preserved, the ability to live unafraid, to love more deeply, to meet fate with an open heart. And so I leave you with one question, the same question that echoes across centuries, whispered in marble halls and desert cells, whispered now into your ear. If tomorrow stripped away everything you take for granted, what part of you would remain unbroken? Carry that question, let it shape you, and if these ancient voices have spoken to you tonight, do not let them fade into silence. Join this journey further. There are more lessons, more experiments, more truths buried in time that can sharpen the way you live now. Subscribe, stay with this channel, and together we will walk deeper into the wisdom of those who faced storms and discovered peace. For their stories are not finished until we live them. And your life is not finished until you dare to begin living it fully. In the language of the ancients, it was called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. The phrase sounds grim, even unsettling. Yet to the Stoics, it was a practice of liberation, not despair. At its heart, the exercise was deceptively simple. Imagine the misfortunes that might strike you tomorrow and face them before they arrive. Not only the small inconveniences, a delay, an insult, a coin lost, but the great disasters as well. The death of a friend, the loss of your wealth, the collapse of your health, the end of your own life. Why would anyone do this? Why deliberately walk through horrors in the safety of your own mind? To the modern ear, it seems backwards. We are told to visualize success, to think positively, to build castles in our imagination. But the Stoics believed the opposite strategy brought greater strength. They argued that if you can stand calmly in the ruins of your own imagined life, then reality can never truly defeat you. Seneca, the Roman statesman and philosopher, put it plainly: he robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand. When we rehearse misfortune, its arrival no longer shocks us. Pain may still visit, but its sharpest weapon, surprise, has been blunted. To understand this better, picture an archer at practice. He does not wait for the chaos of battle to test his skill. He fires arrow after arrow in quiet fields. so that when the storm of war comes, his movements are steady, automatic, unshaken. The Stoics believed the mind required the same discipline. Each night, they would draw back the bow of imagination and fire at the darkest targets they could conceive, so that when those shadows appeared in real life, they could still aim true. Marcus Aurelius, alone in his tent, did not write merely to comfort himself. His private notes, the Meditations, are filled with reminders that the world can break us at any time. Yet his tone is not fearful. Instead, it is steady, almost tender. When you kiss your child goodnight, he warns himself, whisper that he may not be here tomorrow. Harsh words to our ears. But to Marcus, this was not cruelty. It was clarity. Only by facing the fragile nature of life could he love more deeply in the present moment. Epictetus, born into slavery, offered the same lesson in different clothing. When you embrace your wife or child, he said, say to yourself, one day they will die. Not to make the heart cold, but to warm it. For when you remember that nothing is guaranteed, every ordinary moment becomes extraordinary. A simple meal, a shared laugh, even the act of waking to another sunrise becomes precious beyond measure. The thought experiment, then, had two purposes. First, it armed the soul against fear. By imagining loss, you stripped it of its terror. Second, it sharpened gratitude. By rehearsing absence, you learned to love presence more fiercely. This was not daydreaming, it was training. The Stoics approached it as soldiers approach drills, as athletes approach discipline. Night after night, they entered the arena of the Eua, mined and faced the worst fates they could imagine. Some whispered these visions aloud, others scratched them into wax tablets or murmured them in prayer. It was not about predicting the future, but about preparing for it. Yet even here the Stoics were cautious. They warned against letting this practice harden into despair. If you fixate only on loss, you can become bitter, withdrawn, fatalistic. The true Stoic path walked a thin line, to imagine ruin without becoming ruined by the imagination itself. The exercise was meant to polish the soul, not poison it. Think of it like walking into a cold river. At first, the shock makes you gasp. But after a moment, you adjust, you breathe, you find your strength within the chill. The water has not grown warmer, you have grown steadier. So too with premeditatio malorum. Life would not grow kinder, but you would grow stronger. This is the experiment, to step willingly into suffering before it comes, to live through loss in the theater of the mind, so that when the curtain rises on reality, you are ready. To many, it sounded bleak. To the Stoics, it was the most hopeful act of all. For when you have rehearsed the worst, you discover a strange secret. Nothing can truly take your freedom, for you have already faced the cost. At first glance, the Stoic experiment seems like madness. Why summon images of death, poverty, betrayal, exile? Why taste bitterness before it is poured? To most people, this sounds like opening the door to misery. Yet to the Stoics, it was the doorway to strength. The logic begins with a simple truth. Fear feeds on surprise. When something strikes us out of nowhere, it multiplies our suffering. The event itself wounds us once, but the shock, the disbelief, the frantic resistance, these wound us many times over. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, Seneca wrote. It was his warning, but also his solution. If imagination can magnify our pain, then imagination can also train us to endure it. Consider the man who never thinks of loss. He convinces himself the roof will never leak, the market will never fall, the friends he loves will always remain. When life proves otherwise, he collapses under the weight of broken illusions. Compare him with the man who each night rehearses these possibilities. He wakes each day already at peace with their chance of arrival. To him, a cracked roof or lost coin is no ambush. It is familiar terrain. The Stoics believed this was the essence of philosophy, not endless speculation, but preparation for the blows of fate. Epictetus, whose leg was shattered by his master, said plainly, "When you are going to undertake anything, remind yourself what kind of thing it is." He meant, if you go to bathe, expect to be splashed, jostled, insulted. If you go to war, expect blood and loss. If you live, expect death. Nothing that arrives will then feel foreign to you. This practice also served a deeper function. By imagining misfortune, the Stoic learned to separate what was truly his from what was only lent. Wealth, health, reputation, even the love of others, all of these could vanish. What remained? Only the ruling center of the soul, judgment, intention, choice. In rehearsing the loss of externals, the Stoic discovered the core that no power could strip away. Modern people might call this pessimism, but to the Stoics, it was the opposite. It was optimism at the deepest level, the faith that even when stripped of everything, a person could still stand upright. To them, practicing disaster was like inoculating the mind, a small taste of poison to prevent the full sickness of despair. Imagine two sailors caught in a sudden storm. One has only sailed on calm waters, imagining endless sunshine. The other has trained in foul weather, has studied the stars in darkness, has prepared for broken masts and torn sails. Which sailor panics? Which one acts? The storm is the same, but the soul inside the storm is different, and there was more. Premeditatio malorum was not only a shield against fear, but also a lens-sharpening gratitude. For when you spend a moment imagining your child gone, your fortune stolen, your health declined, and then open your eyes to see them still present, you taste joy more vividly than before. Seneca urged his readers, "He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive, and he who has learned to look upon what he has as if it might be lost, has learned to enjoy it truly." This dual power, resilience and gratitude, made the practice irresistible to the Stoics. By rehearsing loss, they not only grew unafraid of tomorrow, but more alive to today. Marcus Aurelius captured it when he reminded himself, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." The awareness of mortality did not paralyze him. It pushed him toward kindness, urgency, presence. So why imagine the worst? Because the worst will come sooner or later in some form. To pretend otherwise is to live in fragile denial. To face it in thought is to live with a steady heart. The Stoics believed that only those who walk through the valley of loss in their minds can walk through life itself without chains. If the Stoics asked their students to imagine misfortune, it was not to dwell in gloom. The exercise was meant to unlock a set of hidden treasures, the kind of treasures that cannot be stolen by thieves or burned by fire. What then were the fruits of this strange discipline? 3 stand above the rest: freedom from fear, gratitude for the present, and resilience in the storms of life. The first and most immediate benefit was liberation. Fear has always been one of humanity's fiercest chains. It bends kings, humbles warriors, and leaves ordinary people trembling at shadows. Yet the Stoics discovered that fear depends on uncertainty. When we do not know what will come, our imagination torments us with endless possibilities. By rehearsing disaster, the Stoics removed the sting of surprise. They learned to say, "Yes, this too may happen, and if it does, I am prepared." Seneca observed that misfortune becomes lighter when anticipated. What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. For him, the act of imagining stripped calamity of its mystery. And once the unknown was known, fear lost its teeth. Imagine waking each morning with the knowledge that no loss, no insult, no illness could shake the foundation of your soul. This is not cold indifference, it is strength. It is the quiet courage of someone who has already rehearsed the worst in the theatre of the mind, and thus walks calmly through the world. The second treasure hidden in this exercise is gratitude. At first, this seems paradoxical. How could picturing death or poverty make life more joyful? Yet the Stoics believed the shadow of loss makes the light of presence burn brighter. Marcus Aurelius urged himself, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly." By imagining that the day was already his last, he found renewed urgency to savor its moments. Epictetus taught his students to practice detachment, not to strip love away, but to make it purer. When you remind yourself that the friend you embrace or the child you tuck into bed may not be there tomorrow, you do not love them less. You love them more fiercely, knowing the hour is fragile. Seneca carried this practice into action. Once a month, he would strip away comfort deliberately, sleeping on the hard ground, eating coarse bread, wearing the simplest clothing. When asked why, he replied, "Is this the condition that I feared?" By practicing loss, he turned ordinary comfort into extraordinary pleasure. A warm meal, a soft bed, a friend's laughter, all glowed brighter when contrasted against their imagined absence. Gratitude, then, was not a luxury to the Stoics. It was a form of armor. A grateful man, they argued, is untouchable, for he sees every small gift as fortune and every misfortune as training. The final benefit of premeditatio malorum was resilience. Life will strike. That much the Stoics never denied. No amount of philosophy can erase pain, illness, or death. What philosophy can do is decide how we meet them. Epictetus said, "Circumstances don't make the man, they only reveal him to himself." A storm reveals whether a house is built on sand or stone. In the same way, a crisis reveals whether a soul has been prepared. By imagining hardships beforehand, Stoics built their inner foundation. When the blow finally landed, they did not crumble. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who ruled in a time of plague, war, and betrayal. He faced repeated disaster, yet his writings do not drip with despair. They show a man who had already met these enemies in thought, and thus could endure them in reality. His empire might crack, his health might fade, his friends might betray him, but his mind, trained by philosophy, remained firm. This resilience was not arrogance. The Stoics did not claim invincibility. They claimed preparedness. They taught that a blow is lighter when the soul has braced itself. And just as a soldier trains with heavy armor so that he is swift on the battlefield, so too does the philosopher train with imagined burdens so that he is light when real ones arrive. Yet the true brilliance of the practice lay in balance. Was not about endless brooding on death and ruin. That would be morbid and destructive. The goal was moderation, enough rehearsal to soften the sting, enough reflection to deepen gratitude, but never so much that one drowned in despair. The Stoics believed philosophy was a medicine. Too little, and the illness of fear returns. Too much, and the medicine itself becomes poison. But the right measure, taken daily, transforms life. Thus, the Stoics found in this strange exercise a triad of power: freedom from fear, gratitude for the present, and resilience in crisis. They believed that any man or woman who practiced it would stand differently in the world, not as someone immune to loss, but as someone no longer enslaved by it. This was the reward of imagining the worst. Not darkness, but light. Not despair, but a soul sharpened into strength. Every powerful practice carries its shadow. The Stoics knew this well. A thought experiment capable of freeing the soul could also twist into something harmful if misunderstood. The same exercise that sharpened resilience could harden into coldness or slide into despair. This is why the Stoics insisted that premeditatio malorum, the rehearsal of misfortune, must be approached with wisdom and balance. The first danger is mistaking preparation for pessimism. Some people, hearing the Stoics speak of imagining death, ruin, or betrayal, believed the philosophers were advocating endless worry. To live in constant dread of loss is not Stoic strength, but weakness in disguise. Seneca warned against this confusion. He urged his students not to shackle themselves with anxiety masquerading as foresight. He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. If you imagine disasters without purpose, you bleed twice, once in fear and once in reality. Stoic practice is not about drowning in scenarios, but about tasting them briefly to build immunity. The second danger lies at the other extreme: nihilism. A careless student might hear the Stoics say, "All things are fleeting, wealth and health and life itself," and conclude, "Then nothing matters." This is the dark abyss the Stoics fought to avoid. Marcus Aurelius himself confronted this temptation. Surrounded by plague, betrayal, and endless war, he reminded himself daily that all things pass. Yet he added a crucial command: while you live, while it is in your power, be good. The awareness of mortality was not meant to drain meaning, but to intensify it. The thought of death should not make us reckless or indifferent, but rather kinder, wiser, and more deliberate. Another danger is the loss of warmth. Practicing detachment, some grew rigid, mistaking numbness for strength. Epictetus warned his followers not to become statues. "Remember that you are a man," he said, "and that what befalls a man is natural." To feel sorrow at loss or grief at death is not a failure of philosophy. It is the mark of being human. The Stoic exercise was never intended to erase emotion, but to keep emotion from becoming tyranny. Imagine a father who, rehearsing his child's death, convinces himself never to feel attachment. He tells himself, "This is Stoic wisdom." But when the child laughs or reaches for his hand, the father feels nothing. This is not strength, it is a distortion. True Stoicism teaches us to love more fiercely because we know the bond is fragile, not to withhold love in the hope of avoiding pain. Finally, there is the danger of false courage. A soldier might say, "Since death is nothing, I will rush headlong into danger," careless of consequence. But this too betrays the philosophy. Stoic training was meant to produce calm judgment, not reckless abandon. To imagine death is to prepare for it, not to seek it without reason. Courage, in the Stoic sense, is rational endurance of hardship, not blind pursuit of destruction. So, how did the Stoics guard against misuse? They set boundaries. Practice premeditatio malorum, but do so with intent. Imagine loss not to wallow in it, but to measure your strength against it. Picture death not to despise life, but to embrace it. Think of misfortune not to withdraw from the world, but to act wisely within it. Seneca gave his students a rhythm: a few days each month spent in poverty, eating coarse food, wearing rough clothes. Not every day, lest life become joyless, but enough to remind the soul of its power. Marcus wrote nightly of death and impermanence, but by day he ruled with justice, fought wars with patience, and tried to act for the common good. Epictetus trained his mind against loss, but also urged compassion, laughter, and friendship. In other words, Stoic foresight was never meant to extinguish humanity. It was meant to free it. Misfortune rehearsed in thought should make us more grateful, not less. It should make us calmer, not colder. The Stoics knew the temptation to misuse their philosophy would always remain. It is easier to become numb than to remain balanced, easier to collapse into dread than to face hardship calmly. But the true Stoic way demands vigilance. The practice is a knife. In skilled hands, it carves strength. In careless hands, it wounds the one who wields it, and so they left us this warning. Do not let the experiment become your prison. Let it be your training ground. Walk through imagined ruin, not to despair of life, but to return to it with greater clarity, gratitude, and resolve. The Stoic exercise of rehearsing misfortune did not appear in isolation. It was part of a much older current of thought, flowing through many cultures, carried in different words but shaped by the same recognition. Life is fragile, uncertain, and brief. And only by facing this truth can we learn to live with strength. Long before the Stoics, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus declared, "All things flow." To him, the universe was not fixed but ever-changing, like a river in constant motion. He reminded his listeners, "You cannot step into the same river twice. The waters have moved on, and so have you." This vision of ceaseless change influenced the Stoics deeply. If all things are in flux, then clinging to stability is an illusion. Loss is not a possibility, it is a certainty. To imagine loss, then, is simply to imagine reality unfolding as it must. In this way, premeditatio malorum was not pessimism, but alignment with the nature of the cosmos. By practicing misfortune, one harmonizes with the river instead of fighting against its current. Across the world in India, Buddhist monks were practicing something strikingly similar. They meditated on impermanence and death, often contemplating their own bodies as subject to decay. Far from being morbid, this awareness produced compassion and detachment. One well-known Buddhist reflection instructs, "Of all the footprints, that of the elephant is supreme. Of all contemplations, that on death is supreme." By facing mortality daily, monks stripped away illusion and attachment, finding peace in the fleeting nature of life. The Stoic reminder to whisper to yourself, "You may die tomorrow," is a cousin to the Buddhist practice of maranasati, mindfulness of death. Both traditions sought not despair, but clarity. When death is no longer hidden, life becomes luminous. Even in early Christianity, echoes of this practice resound. The phrase memento mori, remember that you will die, became a spiritual discipline. Monks carried skulls into their cells, not to frighten themselves, but to recall the brevity of earthly existence. The goal was not coldness, but urgency, a reminder that every act mattered, every choice carried eternal weight. Like the Stoics, these Christians saw death not as an end to dread, but as a teacher to revere. Marcus Aurelius would have recognized their spirit, even if their theology diverged. For both, mortality was a compass, orienting the soul toward what truly matters. What made Stoicism unique was its ability to weave these threads, flux, impermanence, mortality, into a practical daily exercise. While Heraclitus spoke of cosmic change and Buddhists practiced renunciation, the Stoics asked, how can an ordinary citizen, a senator, a soldier, or a slave, use this wisdom to live today? Their answer was premeditatio malorum. Unlike abstract speculation, this was a tool for daily life. Marcus used it before ruling the empire. Epictetus taught it to students struggling with anger or grief. Seneca recommended it to friends navigating wealth power, and exile. It was not confined to monasteries or ivory towers. It was a philosophy for kitchens, marketplaces, and battlefields. The fact that so many traditions converged on this practice reveals something timeless. Wherever humans have lived, they have wrestled with uncertainty, loss, and the inevitability of death. The Stoics, Buddhists, and monks each reached the same conclusion. Only by bringing misfortune into the light can we remove its tyranny. Different words, same insight. Heraclitus, all things change. Buddha, all conditioned things are impermanent. Marcus Aurelius, you could leave life right now. To each the thought of loss was not poison, but medicine. To deny it was to live in fear. To face it was to live in freedom. Tracing these roots shows that premeditatio malorum is not just a Stoic curiosity. It is part of the wider human project of learning how to live when nothing is guaranteed. It links us to the ancients across cultures, reminding us that our struggles are not new. The fears that haunt us today, losing our jobs, our health, our loved ones, are simply modern faces of the same ancient truth. And so, when we practice the Stoic experiment, we are not alone. We stand in a long line of seekers, Greeks, watching rivers, Buddhists meditating on death, monks whispering memento mori. Together they tell us the way out of fear is not denial, but courage. And courage begins with the imagination of loss. It is easy to relegate Stoic practices to the dusty world of scrolls and emperors. Marcus Aurelius writing in a candlelit tent, Epictetus teaching in a small courtyard, Seneca writing letters to distant friends. But the power of premeditatio malorum is not confined to marble statues and Latin phrases. It is meant for us, for the modern world, with all its noise, pressures, and fragile certainties. Consider the fear of losing a job. In a culture that ties identity to career, the thought of dismissal can feel like death itself. Most people avoid even imagining it. They live in quiet dread of the unexpected email, the sudden meeting, the words, "We have to let you go." The Stoic experiment asks you to imagine this happening tonight. Picture the email, the conversation, the walk out of the building with a box in hand. Let yourself feel the sting in advance. At first, it seems unbearable. But after the storm of panic, something surprising happens. You see that life goes on. Friends remain, skills remain, the capacity to rebuild remains. You discover that while the event may be painful, it cannot take everything from you. By imagining loss, you make the prospect survivable, or think of health. We live as though the body will serve us endlessly, forgetting how fragile it is. But the Stoics urged us to remember its frailty daily. Imagine the diagnosis. Imagine the sudden weakness, the test results, the bed you cannot rise from. Again, the first wave is grief. But then comes clarity. If this body can fail, then today's walk matters more. The meal with a friend matters more. Every moment unbroken by pain becomes a treasure. This was Seneca's point in practicing poverty. By imagining the worst, he discovered how much he could live without and how rich the ordinary actually was. For us, rehearsing frailty makes each day of strength a victory. The practice also reshapes how we love. Epictetus urged parents to remember that children, like all of us, are mortal. This was not meant to strip affection, but to deepen it. When we remind ourselves that those we love will not always be here, we hold them closer. A simple dinner together, a casual laugh, a brief embrace, all glow brighter when seen against the backdrop of impermanence. In modern terms, this means resisting the urge to take people for granted. Instead of rushing through conversations, with friends or family, the Stoic experiment nudges us to pause, to see each encounter as fragile and precious. By imagining absence, presence becomes luminous. The Stoics often paired imagination with small acts of practice. Seneca slept on the floor to taste poverty. Marcus reminded himself that every insult, every inconvenience was part of human nature. We too can create small drills. Spend a weekend without technology to remind yourself how little is necessary. Walk instead of driving. Eat plain food instead of delicacies. Live for a moment as if stripped of luxury, or simply, at night, write down one thing you fear losing, then picture it gone. The next morning, when you find it still there, gratitude blossoms. Still, we must be careful not to misuse the exercise. The Stoics did not recommend endless brooding on catastrophe. The purpose is not to flood yourself with dread, but to inoculate yourself against it. Like a vaccine, a small dose strengthens, too much overwhelms. The rhythm of practice is key, a few moments of contemplation, then a return to action with renewed clarity. Our own age is not so different from the Roman world. They lived with plagues, so do we. They faced political instability, so do we. They feared betrayal, loss, decline, death. The costumes change, but the human condition remains. This is why premeditatio malorum still matters. It is not about dwelling in ruins, but about discovering that ruins cannot touch the core of who you are. It is about remembering, in a world of constant distraction, what is truly yours, the power to meet life with steadiness, even when everything else slips away. The greatest evidence of its power is how life looks after you practice it. The small annoyances, traffic, insults, delays, lose their bite. The larger fears, illness, financial strain, rejection, lose their grip. You still feel them, but they do not rule you. You carry within you a kind of invisible armor, forged not by denial, but by rehearsal. And in that space where fear once lived, something else enters. Joy. Not shallow joy, dependent on luck or comfort, but deep joy born of clarity. The joy of realizing that today, in this fragile moment, you are alive, you are breathing, and nothing else is guaranteed. The Stoics did not stop at merely imagining misfortune. To them, endurance alone was not enough. A soldier can grit his teeth through pain. A prisoner can resign himself to chains. But philosophy sought something higher, not only to accept what fate delivered, but to love it. This deeper transformation was called amor fati, the love of fate. To love fate means more than bearing it without complaint. It means seeing even the hardest blows as threads in a larger tapestry. What others call tragedy, the Stoic calls instruction. What others call accident, the Stoic calls design. Life ceases to be a sequence of random disruptions and becomes a coherent whole, stitched together by necessity. Marcus Aurelius wrote often of this. In his private meditations he urged himself, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." These words are not the tone of resignation. They are the words of a man who believed that the very shape of his hardships was part of a greater order, one he might not see, but one he could honor. Epictetus too pressed this lesson. He had no illusions about life's cruelty. He had known slavery, injury, ridicule. Yet his counsel was not to curse what happened, but to align himself with it. "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to," he said. "Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens, and you will be happy." The freedom he taught was not freedom from suffering, but freedom from resistance. This subtle shift marks the difference between Stoic endurance and Stoic joy. To endure is to carry a burden. To love is to transform the burden into meaning. When you love fate, even disaster becomes a teacher, even pain becomes a sculptor of the soul. The image is of a craftsman's hand. The hammer that strikes the iron may feel like violence, but in truth it is shaping the blade. So too with fate. Each blow that falls is part of the forging of character. To curse the hammer is to misunderstand the art. To accept it is wisdom. To love it is greatness. Yet the Stoics were careful not to fall into sentimentality. They did not preach blind optimism. To love fate is not to say that every event is pleasant. It is to say that every event belongs. A plague that kills thousands is not good in itself, but it belongs to the order of nature, and from its presence, new strength, new compassion, or new clarity may emerge. The death of a friend is not sweet, but it is woven into the same fabric that gave the joy of knowing them. To love fate is to love the whole cloth, not only its brightest threads. In this way, amor fati becomes the natural extension of premeditatio malorum. At first, you imagine loss to prepare yourself against fear. In time, you see that loss itself is not alien, but part of the same universe that gave you life. You begin with resistance, move to acceptance, and end in embrace. This attitude changes how one lives daily life. An insult from another no longer provokes outrage. It is simply one of the sounds of the world. A delay on the road no longer feels like theft of time. It becomes time offered for reflection. Even personal failure loses its sting, because it too is part of the process of growth. What once seemed hostile now appears as part of the curriculum of existence. Nietzsche, centuries later, would seize upon this Stoic seed and turn it into a central principle of his own philosophy. He declared, "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it." Though Nietzsche's voice was not Stoic in every sense, he grasped the same fire. That freedom is not only to endure fate, but to delight in its unfolding. For the Stoics, this delight was not a hollow smile forced in tragedy. It was a deep current of harmony flowing beneath every event. If all is nature, and if we ourselves are part of nature, then what happens to us is not an invasion, but an unfolding. To reject it is to reject reality. To embrace it is to be at one with it. Here lies the highest lesson of their thought experiment. To imagine the worst is only the beginning. To accept it is the next step. But the final step, the hardest and most transformative, is to love it. For when you can love even misfortune, you are untouchable. No exile can banish you. No poverty can degrade you. No death can frighten you. You have become aligned with the order of all things. This is amor fati. To meet each day not as a threat, but as a gift, even when wrapped in pain. To see fate not as enemy, but as companion. To say to whatever comes, yes, this too I will love. Why does this ancient thought experiment still matter? Why should the words of men long buried beneath marble ruins concern us in a world of satellites, skyscrapers, and digital noise? It matters because the human condition has not changed. We still fear loss. We still recoil from death. We still tremble when the future is uncertain. The Stoics remind us that these fears, left unchecked, shape the course of our lives more than any external chain. Fear makes us cautious when boldness is needed. It silences us when truth must be spoken. It binds us to comforts that rot us slowly, because we cannot imagine life without them. To live in fear is to live half a life. And so the Stoics taught that to free oneself from fear is to recover one's humanity. Imagine what it means to walk into each day knowing that nothing can truly take away the essence of who you are. Jobs may vanish, reputations crumble, fortunes evaporate, but your mind, your choices, your capacity to meet events with dignity, these remain untouched. That knowledge is not abstract. It changes how one breathes, how one speaks, how one acts. It replaces panic with clarity and hesitation with calm resolve. This is why Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, did not surround himself only with soldiers and senators. He surrounded himself with reminders. He whispered to himself each morning, "You will meet with arrogance, deceit, ingratitude, treachery." He rehearsed these encounters not to grow bitter, but to remain steady. He knew that expecting betrayal made him less vulnerable to its sting, and that remembering mortality gave urgency to his duties. In a life of unimaginable pressure, it was this practice that kept him human. It matters because in our own age, we too are emperors of small realms. We govern households, careers, friendships, the fragile empire of our own days. And like Rome itself, our empires are temporary. The Stoics teach us not to cling to their permanence, but to govern them with justice while we can, and to release them when they pass. It also matters because premeditatio malorum sharpens gratitude in a world drowning in abundance. We have more possessions, more food, more comfort than the ancients could dream of, yet we often feel restless and unsatisfied. Why? Because we mistake more for enough. By imagining loss, the Stoic experiment corrects the eye. Suddenly, the meal before us is precious. The roof above us is wealth. The laugh of a friend is treasure. Gratitude, born of imagined absence, turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. But perhaps most of all, it matters because this experiment teaches us how to face the one certainty that shadows every life: death. We do not speak of it. We push it to the margins, bury it beneath entertainment and distraction. Yet it waits, patient, inevitable. The Stoics refused to avert their eyes. They taught that the man who rehearses death lives differently. He wastes less time. He forgives more quickly. He chooses his words carefully because he knows they may be his last. This is not about morbidity. It is about intensity. When you accept death, life becomes urgent. Each sunrise is no longer routine, but a miracle. Each breath is no longer unnoticed, but a gift. By facing the end, the Stoic finds the beginning of true living. The experiment also matters for how it reshapes our relationships. To remember that everyone we love is mortal is to see them more clearly. The anger that felt urgent softens. The grievance we clung to dissolves. What remains is tenderness, because we know the hour is brief. Epictetus urged parents not to avoid this truth, but to embrace it, so that their love would be fiercer, not weaker. We too can let this practice remind us that the people in our lives are temporary companions, and that each moment with them is sacred. And finally, it matters because it returns us to ourselves. In rehearsing the loss of all externals, we discover what cannot be lost. Wealth, health, reputation, family, even life itself, all may fall away. But the ability to judge wisely, to choose with integrity, to act with courage, remains until the final breath. This is the core of the Stoic creed, that no one can steal your soul's freedom unless you surrender it. So why does it matter? Because the world will continue to change, but our hearts will continue to wrestle with fear, attachment, and the fragility of time. The Stoic experiment is not an artifact. It is a compass. It points us back to what is essential: courage in the face of loss, gratitude in the presence of life, clarity in the shadow of death. And once you have walked through that experiment, once you have looked into the darkness and discovered that it does not own you, something fundamental shifts. You no longer cling so tightly. You no longer panic so quickly. You no longer waste so much time. You begin, perhaps for the first time, to live. The room is quiet. 2 glasses of wine sit untouched. A woman leans forward, eyes sharp, voice steady. Do you even care about me? The question cuts deeper than it sounds. It isn't about love. It isn't about romance. It is about power. Most men stumble here. They rush to explain. They laugh nervously. They pile up words like a wall. But the wall crumbles instantly. Respect slips away. This is how the test begins. A test older than text messages, older than candle-lit dinners, older than modern love itself. In every culture, in every time, women have tested men, not out of malice, not to be cruel, but to see if he bends, to see if he breaks, to see if the man she sits with is the same man he claims to be. And these tests are subtle. They hide behind simple questions, questions that seem innocent, but they are anything but innocent. Each one is a strike at the foundation of a man's composure. Here's the truth. When she asks these questions, she isn't waiting for the perfect answer. She's watching for the reaction. Does he stay calm? Does he hold his frame? Or does he panic? The Stoics faced greater trials than this. Emperors, generals, and slaves alike endured storms of fate. They lost kingdoms. They faced death. And still, they stood unshaken. Their philosophy was simple. Control yourself. Do not be ruled by the chaos outside you. Be anchored. Be still. Be immovable. What if you could bring that same calm to these modern tests? What if every question, every trap, became an opportunity to show strength instead of weakness? In this film, we reveal the 5 questions women use to test men. 5 traps hidden in plain sight. 5 moments where most men collapse. But where the Stoic finds his chance to rise. Stay with me. Because question 3, that one is the silent killer, the one that strips a man of dignity before he even knows it happened. And if you fail it, you may never get it back. Why do women test men? It is a question that makes some men angry. Others shrug it off. But if you ignore the reason, you will never pass the test. The truth is simple. It is not cruelty. It is not manipulation. It is instinct. Think of it like the walls of a fortress. A guard doesn't press the stone to destroy it. She presses to make sure it holds. She tests to see if the foundation is real. And if the wall crumbles at her touch, the fortress was never strong to begin with. That is what these questions are. A press against the wall. A test of strength, of composure, of truth. Now picture this. A young Roman senator stands in the forum. His wife questions him loudly, accusing him of weakness. The crowd holds its breath. If he defends himself with anger, he looks guilty. If he stammers, he looks broken. But he does neither. He stands tall. He answers with calm dignity. And the whispers in the crowd turn into respect. She tested him. He passed. And in passing, he became stronger. The Stoics wrote about this. Epictetus, once a slave, taught that you cannot control the words or actions of others, but you can control your reaction. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." These tests are exactly that, a chance to show mastery, not over her, but over yourself. Modern psychology gives the same answer in different words. Women test to measure certainty. They test to see if your actions match your image. They test because deep down, they want to trust the strength of your frame.